Irish Breakdown is back. Notre Dame fans, and you know what else is back, Vince? College football. I am so fired up today. Right now, I've got Nebraska, Illinois on my side screen. I'm going to be turning on UCLA, Hawaii at some point in time on my iPad. I got this one ready to go. I told my wife earlier, I said, you know what? I need to buy a new TV to mount on my wall right behind me. Then she was like, yeah, we're not doing that. So, okay. But that's going to be my next endeavor. So, Vince, we're back, and it is now 8 days away from Notre Dame's kickoff of the 2021 season. That means game week starts on Monday, which means the next time that we are on the podcast, after today, it means it's game week. It's game prep. Getting ready for the game. So we're very excited about that. And before we get to game week, Vince, you know, we've had months and months of breaking down this Notre Dame team and every aspect of this team. We do a show a day during the week. We have covered this team top to bottom. And now comes the hardest part, in my opinion. And that is, it's time to make predictions.
It's where the rubber meets the road, right?
And that's what our show is going to be about today. We're going to really kind of look over this football team. We're going to go through the schedule top to bottom. We're going to kind of break it down into the 4 quarters of the season, so 3 games at a time. Talk about each quarter, just kind of go over the schedule, talk about the games that concern us the most, the things about this football team that were – you know, that just a couple final MVP predictions and just a couple aspects of the season that we'll talk about during. And, you know, hey, this is a concern or this is an exciting thing. And at the end of this part of it, Vince, we will make our season predictions. We're going to go and we're going to go all in. We're going to go regular season final record, and we're going to go postseason destination. We're not going to go all in on, okay, I'm predicting that they're going to do this in the postseason because that'll come down the road.
Yeah, I'm nervous.
So it's prediction time, Vince. Yeah. And then following the Notre Dame aspect of the breakdown, we're going to do our college football 2021 overall college football breakdown. So we're going to predict our conference winners, our Power 5 conference winners, and we're going to make our college football playoff predictions. So that is what we're discussing today, Vince. So, audience isn't as big as normal, but I don't care. We have the diehards with us today.
Yeah, baby. It's Saturday. It's gonna rise, but we got the people that I don't want to say the people that matter.
Yeah, we got the people that are serious.
Yeah,
about this,
I like
2021 season.
And you know what else we have? We have the people that are going to hang it over our heads if we're wrong. Because
that's how our people are. I don't think the ones the people that aren't in the show today will be the ones that do that. Those will be the ones that do that.
I mean that in a good way, because that's what my buddies would do to me. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. So before we begin, we do have a super chat from Nate Tony. Appreciate that very much, Nate. He says, hey, guys, been a podcast listener since the first show and of before at BGI, because Vince and I both were on podcasts before at BGI with the legendary Loose Emoji. Yes. Appreciate all you do to bring the best indie info to an Irish fan here in Arkansas. You know, one of my good friends, a high school teammate of mine, lives in Arkansas. So, unfortunately, he is an Arkansas fan. I would have liked to be able to tell you, Nate, that, hey, there's another Notre Dame fan there. But John's a great guy, just has bad taste in Scott's football team. Nate, thank you so much for that super chat. I appreciate it. And look, I want to get into Vince this season, and this is a really interesting year for Notre Dame because, you know, we've seen, if you go back and look at that 2017 team and the 2018 team and just when this run started, if you really look at this roster, most of those guys are gone.
True.
And I think I have to go back. I think all the starters, I believe, off those teams are gone. The 17 and 18 teams.
Right.
And so we're going to find out this year if the success of Notre Dame the last few years has been about a couple really strong classes that are now gone, mostly gone, 16 and 17, 15, 16 and 17 classes that are now mostly gone, or if this is a continuation of what we believe to be a trend of this is the program that Notre Dame is. And that's going to require Notre Dame to have another double-digit win season. And I would say double-digit win season in the regular season. I think that's the floor before we kind of get into our prediction.
Agreed.
If Brian Kelly's program is as healthy as you and I think it is, and as you and I have been saying, people in the national media that don't buy that, don't think it is what we think it is, they're going to be proven right, or we're going to be proven right, and they're going to be wrong. And that's what this season is about. How healthy is this program? Was it really just a reflection of they had a couple strong classes and they're going to kind of fade down now those classes are gone? Or is this no, this is just a really great program that's ready to ascend? I think that's where this season is going to be.
And I think that's
find out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, look, we've been – what was it, a couple of days ago, we were talking about the Wisconsin game, and of course we're going to get into that more specifically here in a minute, but how it's perceived that Wisconsin is the more steady program, and that's why they're favored in that game.
Right. 22-12 the last 3 years compared to 33-5 for Notre Dame, but they're the more steady program.
But that's the national perception of Notre Dame. It's like, well, they peak here and then they hit the basement again, and then they peak and then they hit the basement, and all of that. So
there's actually some decent teams on the schedule this year, so they're going to lose.
And exactly, and everybody's looking at that 5-game stretch, et cetera, which of course we're going to get into. But it's just, this is an opportunity. I really do believe where I kind of agree with you is that Notre Dame has an opportunity to really silence some people and let them know that, hey, this is a program that is sustainable, and it has been sustained since 2017, and
they're reloading.
It's a 4-year run. I mean, that doesn't just happen, right? That's not just a class, that's really good, or a quarterback, or or a position player that put the team on his back, and that's why they've been good, that kind of a thing. This is a sustained success, and we know that that's what it is. We believe that that's what it is. But I feel like this year is an opportunity for Notre Dame to show that to everyone that doesn't follow Notre Dame as closely as we do. Right. The ones that
we're going to find out if we're actually correct on that.
Well, there's
obviously
fair.
The possibility that we're incorrect and this team's going to take a step back.
I don't think it should.
Possible. I don't think their personnel losses were necessarily greater than the other top teams in the country.
Exactly.
So we're going to find out if Notre Dame does. Like right now, Notre Dame is, and Lou and I used to talk about this a lot when, speaking of Nate's podcast, we did sort of this tier system. And,
I listened to that podcast.
where Lou and I were, the debate was, where does Notre Dame stand amongst the second tier? Well, right now they're near the top with a Georgia, with an Oklahoma, with those programs. Those programs are considered to be top 5 teams this year. Notre Dame is not. We're going to find out if they belong there, or if the national media is correct and that Notre Dame is not that kind of program. They did benefit from soft schedules the last 2 years, which they have. They've played soft schedules the last 2 years. And last year was not their fault. That schedule last year was not going to be soft had they had the schedule they originally going to have.
Agreed.
The COVID schedule is the one that was soft. The ACC schedule with South Florida was the one that was soft. And we're going to find out if this team is as good as you and I think it is.
Sure.
And that's what's going to be fun. And we're going to find out over the next, 13, 14 weeks, just how good this team can be. So that's what we're going to dive into today, Vince. And we're going to kick it off, just kind of going through the schedule. And as I said, we're going to dive into just parts of this team. As we kind of go through the schedule, we'll bring about certain parts, and then we'll wrap things up with, making our predictions, putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak.
Whew. Yeah. So we're going to go through the schedule by quarters, because that's what we do as coaches. That's how we coach. So that's how we're going to go through it as analysts as well, because that's it. Everything you do as a coach, right? When you're teaching a kid how to backpedal, or you're teaching a kid how to throw the ball, you break it down into smaller pieces. Well, that's what coaches do with the schedule. So that's what we're going to do with the schedule as well. But before we do have a super chat. Brian, you want to grab that one?
Bryce DeJarnett. Just want to say thanks for all you guys do. Love the content and super pumped for the season. Can't wait to see what our team can do. And Bryce,
absolutely,
we're with you. We're trying to kind of hold, now that we're diving into it, we're going to try to hold back the excitement, but it's not just excitement for Notre Dame. It's just college football's back, man. We're so excited.
I can't wait to get off. Not that I can't wait to leave the podcast, because this is the highlight of my day, but I'm excited to watch some college football tonight. And I don't really care who it is, to be honest with you. There's like 5 games, I think, today, and I'm fired up to watch whatever's on. But so anyway, so we're going to break it down into quarters. So let's talk quarter number 1, Brian. First 3 games of the season. Obviously, they open up at Florida State on September 5th. Then they come and have their home opener on September 11th. And then they have Purdue at home as well on September 18th. That is the first quarter of this schedule. Any team in the first quarter that you are worried about, or that is the stumbling block to Notre Dame, making it through that first quarter? I want to say unscathed, but I don't know if I'm being too optimistic. But
no, I think this is an ideal first quarter for Notre Dame.
I agree.
I look at it and I say, look, what I don't necessarily love are when your first few games are against teams that you're literally better off having an inter-squad scrimmage, and that's like some of the FCS teams that people play.
Sure.
I think Florida State is a good first challenge for Notre Dame. I think they're a team with some athleticism, with some talent, not to the level that Notre Dame has. This is a game that Notre Dame certainly should win, but it's a game also where you're going to have to, you can't make a bunch of mistakes. Like, I've pointed out in the past, like the Nevada game back in what was like 2009, when they didn't really play that well. And you can if you play like bad football, Florida State's either going to make it close or knock you off. So you can't just bring your D game and still win like you could against New Mexico. Remember, they played actually kind of poorly at times against New Mexico in 2019 and won 66-14. That game doesn't help you get ready for Georgia, in my opinion.
Exactly.
This is a Florida State team that is going to challenge Notre Dame. They're going to make Notre Dame be ready to play their game. And then you look at it and say, okay, well, still a winnable game, but then what follows? Well, you have 2 home games, and the next home game is a step down. Toledo, with all due respect to the job that Jason Candle has done at Toledo, they're a good quality MAC program, but they're not a team that's gonna beat Notre Dame or should be close with Notre Dame. So that's kind of
they're not the worst team on the schedule either. I mean, arguably, right?
Arguably, yeah. They may, them and Navy. I think it's down to them and Navy for sure.
Right.
So that's kind of that's your get right game, right? And I think you always need a get right game in the opener. Your get right game this year is against Toledo, and those are musts. And the get right game is that game that you can play bad and still win. Now, what you don't want to have is have your get right game be Ball State in 2018. That's the fear.
Yeah, for sure.
For any team this early in the year. It's not my fear for this Notre Dame team, however.
Agreed.
I'm not concerned about that happening, Vince. But it is a game where, hopefully you can kind of get some backups in the game. And it's a nice game to have after you've had a pretty hard camp, which Notre Dame has had. They've really pushed this team hard, according to my sources, and now they've kind of pulled back a little bit this last week, but that's a good thing. I'm saying that as a positive. You need to push your team this time of the year, but they've had that push, and so you look at this next step and say, okay, you've got Toledo, then Purdue. Purdue of the 3 teams is the one that would be most concerning for me. The reason I say that is because I think they're the better coached offensively. You know my stance on Jeff Brom.
I do.
There's some familiarity there, obviously, with recruits and different things like that. But Purdue of the 3 teams has the players at positions that could do the most damage. Meaning, obviously, you have George Karlaftis at defensive end. You've got David Bell at wide receiver. I really like Jack Plummer, the quarterback. I always want to call him Jake Plummer for obvious reasons.
Is there any relation? Do you know?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
I could. I mean, maybe, but I don't.
I didn't know if it was like a clear, obvious fact.
Yeah, and he won the starting job there. So and Purdue's got some talent. Like they have better talent than their record last year indicated. I think the COVID year hurt them. They had some guys out. Rondell Moore was out.
Sure.
They went 2-4, but they lost to Northwestern by 7. They lost to Minnesota by 3 in a game they got absolutely screwed. They lost to Rutgers by 7 in a game they just blew. And then they lost in Nebraska. So, I mean, they had some bad losses to teams, but they weren't getting smacked around. And I'm concerned about this team because they're capable if they start clicking. You can't out-scheme Notre Dame and beat them when you have inferior players.
Sure.
But if you have playmakers like Karlaftis and like, TJ Sheffield, remember TJ Sheffield committed Notre Dame for a couple minutes and then, they kind of pushed him out of the class and he's at Purdue. He's a good athlete. He's expects him to do some things. Milton Wright's a good athlete. So they have Xander Horvath, a quality running back, local kid. He's a good football player. So they just have enough talent at the skill positions that if Notre Dame doesn't play well in the areas we anticipate them playing well, especially the defensive line, then this team can give Notre Dame some problems. So of the 3, that would be my biggest concern. And then the other factor of this, Vince, as we kind of peek ahead to quarter 4, The other concern with Purdue is what comes next. You can say whatever you want, but these are still 18 to 21-year-old kids, 18 to 22-year-old kids. They know what Purdue is. They know what Purdue's record's been, and they know what comes after Purdue. And that is that trip to Chicago against Wisconsin. So that's the other reason that Purdue, Vince, for me, is sort of the one that I'm like, of the three, that's the one I'm most concerned about.
Well, the only reason for me that Purdue would get that nod for me is because of what comes next week. Mm-hmm. And that I had a hard time looking at this first quarter and saying, okay, who am I worried about? Who could be that stumbling block? Who could be? And I thought about Toledo, and again, only because of what happened against Ball State and that kind of thing. But I think this team, the makeup of this team from a leadership standpoint, I just don't see that being the case.
I also don't see them practicing their threes all week.
And that was the next thing that was going to come out of my mouth is I think the coaches learned their lesson too. Like I don't see them preparing for Toledo the way that they did for Ball State. So I think that there was a learning curve there for everybody. And so I don't see a repeat of that. I think that Florida State has the enigma for Florida State for me is all the transfer guys that they have. And there's a lot of question marks. So I would pick Purdue because of the Wisconsin game that comes next, but I'm going to stick with Florida State only because it's game one. It's on the road. There's a lot of questions about who Florida State is because they nailed that transfer portal, the junior college route. Like they pretty much turned their whole team over. Mm-hmm. And look, we know pretty much what Florida State is. I am not saying that Notre Dame is going to lose this game. I think they're going to win pretty handily, to be honest with you. I just feel like if for whatever reason Notre Dame doesn't come out of the chute the way we are anticipating, Florida State could bite them in the butt a little bit.
Right.
And so that's mine. That's mine. And I understand where you're coming from with Purdue. They just don't scare me that much.
But I think the transfer portal thing is partly why I'm not as high on Florida. Yeah, it's going to take them some games to get there together they just are. And I just don't think they're – I mean, look, everybody talks about how, I'm worried about Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end. Well, George Karlaftis is considered a better defensive end. Florida State's got athletes. They don't have anybody as good as David Bell. So that's the thing for me is and their quarterback, they don't necessarily have a quarterback yet because they haven't had a guy earn that job, or at least publicly haven't had a guy earn that job.
I've heard some rumblings that Milton may not be 100% physically.
But that's the whole thing that, everybody kind of bought into the Mackenzie Milton stuff. I said, look, we don't know if this kid can play. I mean, it's 2 years removed. How is his knee going to hold up after a full fall camp? Well, that's the reports that, the rumblings that you're hearing. So I just look at it and I say, and as I'm watching this Nebraska-Purdue game or this Nebraska-Illinois game, you realize how important good quarterback play is to any team. And how the lack of can hurt you. But, I think Jordan Travis is an interesting player. He concerns me actually a little bit more than Mackenzie Milton because he can run around so much, but I don't think he has the passing ability to beat Notre Dame. And that's the thing that comes down to for me. But this is the first quarter where you fully expect Notre Dame to be 3-0 when it's all said and done. I do not. Yeah, I do not. When I talk about Purdue being the team that concerns me, it's not about me Notre Dame losing to Purdue. It's about maybe that game's a little bit closer than maybe we expect.
Sure.
But I believe Notre Dame comes out of this first quarter with a 3-0 record.
Well, and I will also add that whoever gets the credit for making the schedule, whether that's Jack Swarbrick or a combination of Swarbrick and Kelly and whoever, right? Whoever had their hands in on it. I think this was put together brilliantly. Because look, Wisconsin is a big game and it's in a neutral site and you got the special uniforms and all the pomp and circumstance that goes along with that game, right? These three games and just the way that this team is put together this year for Notre Dame, they're going to need a little bit of time to kind of get everybody going in the right direction too, right? They're not going to come out of the gate, I don't think, scoring 40, 50 points a game and, doing everything that we hope that they will be doing potentially by the end of the season, defensively, offensively, all the things we've talked about in the past, they're going to need a little bit. You'd call it a get-right game in game two. I agree with that. This 3-game stretch is a perfect opportunity because Notre Dame can out-athlete and out-talent all three of these teams with not much of a problem, and they're going to be 3-0. And this gives them a chance to kind of get everything going the way they want it to go before they hit this stretch that starts with Wisconsin.
Because the nice thing about that, Vince, is those teams aren't good enough to beat Notre Dame, in my opinion. They are good enough, however, to expose weaknesses that the coaches must address.
Sure.
And that's why it's such a good first quarter is you're going to learn, oh, you know what? If we're going to beat these teams down the road, we got to do better here.
Right.
Whereas when you're playing New Mexico and some of the teams Notre Dame has opened up with in the past, it doesn't really you don't find out those problems until you get to game 5 and you're playing somebody really good, or game 4 in this case. So, but quarter 2, Vince, let's transition to quarter 2. But I agree with you. This is a good setup first quarter. You're going to be tested enough to where you're going to learn a lot about your team, but not to the point where you really have the concern of losing a game. If they lose a game in the first quarter, this is going to be a long year.
And you and I will have very different outlooks from that point forward based on if they lose one of those games. I mean, most likely, unless something catastrophic. Yeah. Anyway, 3-0. That's what we're going with. All right, quarter number 2. Obviously, they go to Chicago for a noon game against Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the home team for that, so the game will be on Fox. Cincinnati then is October 2nd at home, which is fantastic. And then the following week is Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. And my guess is that's going to end up being a night game, although I could be wrong about that. But if Notre Dame is who we think they are, that's going to be a night game in Blacksburg. So things ramp up here a little bit in the second quarter, Brian. Obviously, no quote-unquote easy game here. Which team are you looking at where Notre Dame could potentially stumble, or however you want to take this next one?
Yeah, so to me, the way I want to kind of do it, Vince, is I want to kind of go over the schedule, like the quarter as a whole, and then kind of look at the team I'm most concerned with. And that's kind of how I look at this. To me, this quarter right here is the one that will define Notre Dame's season.
Yes, agreed.
I believe the 2 best teams in the schedule are in this quarter, and the trap game for me is in this quarter. This is going to be the season-defining quarter for me. If Notre Dame comes out of this quarter undefeated, I think they can run the table. Now, does that mean they will run the table? They're Virginia, USC, North Carolina.
Sure.
There's some teams that can knock them off. Absolutely. But I'm going to feel that if this team comes out of this quarter undefeated, I'm going to say this team has a chance to compete for a championship. I really believe that, because the thing about this quarter, and when I look at Wisconsin first, Wisconsin is going to test Notre Dame physically. They're going to test them size and strength-wise. The O-line is going to be tested. The D-line is going to be tested. The linebackers are going to get tested. We're going to see if this Notre Dame team can play big boy football, right? And that's going to be important. If they can't stop Wisconsin from running the ball, then how are they going to stop Ohio State or Oklahoma or Clemson from running the ball, right? Or Alabama from running the ball? And we're going to find out if Notre Dame's lack of size on defense is going to end up being a big problem. That's what Wisconsin's going to tell them. Can they play big boy football? We're going to find out about Tommy Rees in this game, because Wisconsin has one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, in my opinion, and Jim Leonard. Certainly one of the most creative defensive coordinators in college football.
Because I think he has to be in order to be successful.
Right. To me, so then, is this a game where Tommy Rees can say, okay, I'm going to see your this, and I'm going to raise you this, and we're going to rip off big plays? This is a chance for us to see just how far Tommy Rees can take this football team in year 2, this offensive football team in year 2. So I think it's a big learning experience for him, and just this team as a whole. It's that game, Vince, where this is where you learn what kind of physical toughness your team has. It's not necessarily a mental toughness game. Mental toughness will be how you bounce back from the physical pounding that you're going to give and take in this game. And that's where the Cincinnati game comes into play. You play this physical battle against Wisconsin, and then you go and you play Cincinnati at home. This is arguably the best team you're going to play all year, arguably. And it's a very well-coached football team. You've got a coach on the offensive side of the ball, and Mike Denbrock, that knows you pretty well. Coached your offensive coordinator in college. He was on the staff with Tommy. He was on the staff when Tommy Rees was a player. He obviously knows Brian Kelly extremely well. You've got a defensive coaching staff that's going to know Marcus Freeman pretty well. You've got individually good players on defense. This is to me going to be the most talented defense Notre Dame is going to face all year. Offensively, they've got some weapons. Jerome Ford can beat you. I mean, he's a home run threat every time he touches the ball. He's their version of Chris Tyree, Alabama transfer. Michael Young, we all know what Michael Young can do. So Alec Pierce, really good tall receiver. Desmond Ritter's a guy that people are projecting to be a first-round pick. So now this is the game where you're going to get tested from a skill standpoint. You should beat Cincinnati in the trenches. So it's back-to-back games. You get tested with your big boys in week 1. You get tested with the skill more and the coaching and the scheme in week 2, or week 2 of this quarter. That's where you start to find out just how good this football team is going to be. Seeing that back-to-back challenge of arguably your 2 best opponents, back-to-back games. How do you bounce back from one or the other is going to be a big test of this football team, Vince. And then you get into game 3. Let's say you win the first 2. Is there any letdown as you look ahead to the bye week and then USC when you travel to Virginia Tech, a team that's not projected to be that good, not a preseason top 25 team? You're going to a place where the last time you played them, you beat them by 3 touchdowns. But as anyone that read my all-opponent team articles where I went over the all-opponent teams, nobody had more than Virginia Tech on mine. And so say this is a more talented team than people may realize. This is an athletic team. This is a team that's going to have one of the best receivers Notre Dame's going to face in Trey Turner. They have very athletic defense. That's it. So that's a game where you have to bring it all 3 of these games. And so if you can win, you're going to be physically tested in week 1. You're going to be schematically tested in week 2 of this quarter. And then you're going to be mentally tested in week 3, because can you mentally do that back-to-back-to-back? That's what separates the good teams from the great teams. And that's, to me, what this quarter is going to tell us about this Notre Dame football team, in my opinion.
All right, before I jump into what I want to say about this quarter, we do have a super chat, Brian, if you want to grab that and throw it up. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the support more than you know. He says, pleasant surprise, live chat on a football Saturday. From what I have gathered about FSU's receiving core, the DBs have a great chance to gain confidence. We don't even know who's going to be throwing them the ball. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's an awesome opportunity.
When it's a young group, too, I mean, they're going to have a couple freshmen playing, and I'm not opposed to playing freshmen, but their freshmen are playing kind of because they have to play.
Yeah.
Ontario Wilson is not a guy that scares me. And that's the misconception I think people have about Florida State, is there's still this assumption that, they're going to have a bunch of these,
freak athletes.
Yeah. And I don't see that on this football team. I really don't. I really don't. But thank you, Scott, for the super chat. Yeah. I appreciate it very much.
That's awesome. That is
very
awesome.
much.
As far as my thoughts on the second quarter, I feel like Wisconsin is the most important game in this quarter, and I know Brian just waxed poetic about how good Cincinnati is, and I get that. I'm on that bus, believe me. But Cincinnati's the first real test, and how this team reacts.
You're telling me that Wisconsin's not a test for Notre Dame?
I'm sorry, I meant Wisconsin. The words didn't come out of my mouth.
Gotcha.
I'm talking all about Wisconsin here. Sorry.
Because I'm like, how do you set up what you just said, and then you go to Cincinnati's the first test? I give it. Yeah. Yes. Wisconsin is the first big test. Right.
Wisconsin's the first major test, and how this team responds to that is going to tell me a ton about this football team. And if they go out and they do what I believe that they can do against Wisconsin, I don't see them having an issue with Cincinnati. And again, I understand what you're saying about Cincinnati.
They're different teams, though.
They're completely different teams. But here's my thing. Here's why I think they're going to be successful against Cincinnati. Because in the trenches that we were just talking about, them having a test against Wisconsin, that's going to be where Notre Dame has a severe advantage in Cincinnati. And if they can create the havoc, especially defensively, the way I think that they can with going up against Cincinnati's offense, I don't know that they're going to be able to get a whole lot going. Because of what
hurt them against Georgia in the bowl game last year.
Right, exactly. And so that's why my confidence in the Cincinnati game is a little bit higher than yours. But the Wisconsin game for me is the big one. And it's a big one physically, and it's a big one mentally too. Because as of right now, that's the underdog. They're the underdog going into that game.
For now. Right.
Yeah. They're the underdog, and they're being told that they're not supposed to win that game, right? Or they're being told they're not supposed to win a lot of the games. That's another conversation. But I feel like this is the first opportunity where people are going to start picking the opponent as opposed to the first 3 games, right?
Right. I think there's going to be a
game.
lot of people picking Cincinnati to beat Notre Dame as well.
Right. I think this is the first one, though.
Yeah.
This is the first one.
Right.
And depending on how they do in that Wisconsin game, I think is going to frame out how people feel about the Cincinnati game. I do. I think it's going to be Notre Dame's coming out party in game 4.
I think they have to beat both of those teams for people to respect them.
Okay.
I do. I think if they beat Wisconsin and lose to Cincinnati, it's going to be worse than the other way around.
Same old. Yeah, right.
It's going to be worse than losing to Wisconsin and beating Cincinnati.
Right.
The where I would disagree with you is Wisconsin's the first test. Completely agree with you. Where I guess I can't jump on board of if you beat Wisconsin, you're going to beat Cincinnati's because they're 2 different teams. And what I mean by that is I'm not necessarily worried about Notre Dame losing a low-scoring ground and pound game for the same reason that I'm worried about Cincinnati more than I am Wisconsin. And in this day and age, you have to be able – if you're going to beat Notre Dame, you have to be able to score.
Yeah.
You're not going to beat Notre Dame 17-13. And when I look at Wisconsin, I see big boy football, but I don't see it – I don't see a team that has the athletes on either side of the ball to be able to out-athlete Notre Dame. The reason that Cincinnati to me is the bigger challenge in regards to losing is because what Cincinnati has that very few teams on the schedule have is they have athletes on offense that are threats to score every time they touch the ball. And that concerns me because you could dominate Cincinnati in the trenches and Jerome Ford gets free once for a 70-yard touchdown. Or Michael Young rips off a play because he made somebody miss in space. Or Alec Pierce gets over top of your defense. Or Desmond Ridder takes off running.
But do you think all those things are going to happen? Because they would all have to happen for them to outscore Notre Dame's offense, in my opinion.
Sure, exactly, which is why I'm not predicting them to lose to them. But what I'm saying is they have a better chance of that. But you let me finish my point. The other thing that they have on defense is they have an edge rusher that's arguably the best edge rusher they're going to face, and they have the only cornerback on the schedule that Notre Dame is going to face that you can say can line up and go man-to-man against Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey. He's one of the best cornerbacks in the country. Wisconsin doesn't have that. So the combination of having a very well-coached, pretty fast defense that Marcus Freeman built, right? Like if we think Marcus Freeman is this great coach, he built that defense. If Marcus Freeman leaves in 3 years, do we think the defense is going to suck all of a sudden the next year? No, we're going to think it's going to still be pretty good, right? Because the players he recruited and the players he coached are still there. They didn't lose hardly anybody off that defense. Now, no, they don't have Marcus Freeman coaching it, but talent-wise, this is going to be the best defense, in my opinion, they're going to face all year. That combination of they're going to be able to make enough stops again, if things go in their favor, they can make stops, they can force turnovers, and they've got big play weapons on offense. So mistakes that Notre Dame makes against Cincinnati are going to hurt you a lot more than a mistake that you can make against Wisconsin. So let's say you miss a field goal, and Wisconsin's got to go 80 yards. I don't see Wisconsin doing that. Cincinnati can. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm coming from. Of those 2 games, I could see Notre Dame beating Wisconsin ugly and then playing that same weak way the next week and losing to Cincinnati. So, like, let's say Notre Dame brings their B- game to both games. Their B- game, I think, is still good enough to beat Wisconsin. Their B- game might still be good enough to beat Cincinnati, but also could get you beat, depending on which parts lead to that B-. So that's the thing for me. Any team that's going to me, is going to be a concern to beat Notre Dame is going to be a team that has the athletes to beat Notre Dame, because there hasn't been a team in the last 4 years that's been able to beat Notre Dame in the trenches and win the games without athletes on the perimeter. And that's what I think Wisconsin has. And that's why I think Wisconsin's overrated. They don't have a Jonathan Taylor at running back. With all due respect to Jalen Berger and Ches Malusi, they're good players. They're not Jonathan Taylor.
Not many people are.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
But of the last 3 years, the only year Wisconsin was really good was when they had Notre Dame's current quarterback at quarterback.
Correct. No,
and
I
had
agree.
Jonathan Taylor at running back.
Yeah.
And so when I look at it, I just see I just think Wisconsin's a little bit of an overrated team. They were number 1 on my schedule of the toughest game, partly because it's the first.
Exactly.
Partly because it's away from home. But that's why I view it as but what I'm looking at it is, to me, for Wisconsin to beat Notre Dame's going to have to lose the game. That's the difference.
Right.
I think if Cincinnati plays their A game, they can beat Notre Dame where I don't know if Wisconsin can. That's the difference for me. But
I get that.
What makes this challenging, Vince, is the back-to-back nature of it. That's the thing that makes this quarter so challenging. And then if you are able to get past those two games, then you've got Virginia Tech coming up.
Which I think is an absolute trap game.
Which is why I say this is the defining quarter.
They're going to look past that one. And, I mean, I could easily see that. And I am 1,000% on board with this is the toughest quarter of the season. There's no chance that I'm picking any other quarter that would be as tough as this one for everything that you just said.
Right.
I think the toughest teams are in here. I think the order that you mentioned is a huge factor. The fact that Cincinnati is at home, I think, is huge. And you're going to hear me say that probably a few more times because all of their big games are either at home or in Chicago. And I feel like that is a huge plus on this schedule that I don't think enough people are taking into account.
Right.
Outside. You know, when I say other people, I'm talking like national media, et cetera, who thinks Notre Dame's like an 8-win team.
Yeah.
Like the 8.5.
Haven't lost. I would be willing to bet you that most of those people, if you pushed on them right away without giving them time to think, if you say, when was the last time Notre Dame's lost at home, would not realize that it's been almost 4 years.
It's Georgia, right?
Georgia, which is the second game of this post 2016 turnover.
Right.
You know, and I believe they have the second longest home winning streak in the country behind Clemson.
Yeah.
And it's only second behind them by like 2 games because Clemson lost at home towards the end of 2016. Remember, they lost to Pitt at home at the end of 16. Right. Notre Dame lost at home at the beginning of 17.
It's the second game of the
year. I think it's like
28-26.
Clemson's 28, Notre Dame's 26. So yet Notre Dame is going to lose multiple games this year to Cincinnati and North Carolina and USC and those kind of things.
Right.
I just could they lose one at home? Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Sure.
That streak's going to come to an end someday. You know.
Right.
Well, hopefully not. But
I mean, that'd be great.
Assuming.
If it didn't. I mean, we're trying to be realistic here. We're trying to not have the rose-colored glasses on.
Right.
But I back to my point about the second quarter. The order of the games makes it very difficult, but the fact that Cincinnati is at home, I think, is a huge plus. It's a huge bonus to this quarter. If that was on the road, I would be a little more hesitant on my love of Notre Dame in those 2 games.
But I think the other thing that you're missing, Vince, is the fact that of what you say about Wisconsin, about how good they are and how tough they are, could potentially make the Cincinnati game even tougher. Because you are coming off a brutal game. You are coming off a physical game. You are coming off a game where you're playing an offense that plays to me, Wisconsin's almost like Navy, meaning nobody else you plays football like that anymore.
That's a good point. Sure.
And so then you're used to playing. You're going to have some different defensive looks. You're going to have some different coverages, some different things that's going to kind of get you off your growing towards what you're going to be. So, I think if Cincinnati was first, I would say, okay, I feel a little better about this 1-2. My fear is that failure in the one could lead to failure in the other. Even if one's a win, the second one being a loss. Whereas I don't think if you got past Cincinnati and then had Wisconsin coming up, I'd feel a little bit better about that one. Yeah. But that's what makes this a little bit of this quarter even a little bit more challenging.
Either way, this is the hardest quarter of the season, and it's not that close, to be honest with you. So we can agree on that for sure.
And the nice thing is too is this quarter takes them to the break.
Yes.
So Notre Dame's fall break, which is usually the where they've had a lot of problems in past years, is going to be during the bye week.
Right.
Which is, again, you talk about just a brilliant job of scheduling.
Yeah.
That's huge. And so when they go play USC, they're going to have a week of exams and all that already being behind them for a week, which is incredibly important.
And then they get a chance to maybe, look, they're going to be nursing some injuries. And I say injuries, not necessarily injuries they're going to keep guys out, but, bumps and bruises. And they're going to have a chance to kind of rest that stuff.
You play Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech back to back to back. You're going to be worn out a little bit.
You're going to enjoy that week off. Okay. Yeah. Plain and simple. So just to outline what the third quarter is for those people that don't know the schedule like we do. October 23rd, USC comes to Notre Dame for the first night game at home this season, 7:30 start, followed by, obviously with no time in between, followed by North Carolina on October 30th, also a night game, and then Navy rolls into town November 6th. So 3 home games in a row. Well, I guess technically it's 4 home games. No, I'm sorry. 3 home games in a row because it was Virginia Tech. So 3 home games in a row, 2 night games, which I despise from a working standpoint. But the atmosphere at Notre Dame at night games is really turning into something special, I think. And I think this year, especially with fans coming back and the whole thing, I think these night games are going to be unbelievable. And you take that USC game, and it's shaping up to be one of the bigger recruiting weekends of the season. So you add that into it as well. And you're talking about a heck of a third quarter here, a heck of a way to kick off this third quarter. And for me, I'm going to start this off, Brian. For me, the reason this one is not my toughest quarter is because of Navy. Yeah. And look, USC, tough game. North Carolina, tough game. I get it. But Navy, if we're looking at this in threes, Navy just doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. They are not the Navy of old, unfortunately.
Especially at Notre Dame.
Right, exactly. And look, Brian Kelly has figured out Navy, right? They have a game plan for Navy, and Navy just doesn't have the dudes that Navy has had in the past. They just don't. So that's why this quarter probably ends up as my number 2 as far as toughness is concerned, because you do have USC and North Carolina at both huge games. But it's my number 2 by a good distance because of Navy.
I also want to point out that we're purposely not talking about how this stretch of teams have bye weeks before, because it was the same thing people talked about last year. Oh, all these teams have buys. Right. The ACC screwing over Notre Dame, and Notre Dame ran the table. That is the most overrated thing. It's like Notre Dame fans always have to find this like boogeyman in the schedule, right? It used to be who you played after Navy, because Notre Dame would lose after Navy. And I always kept saying, well, that's because they weren't very good teams. Notre Dame wasn't a very good team. Now, all of a sudden, Notre Dame's really good, and they're not losing after they play Navy, right? It's just like, well, they don't have a great home environment. That's why they lose. No, they lose because they're not a very good team.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, they're a good team, and they're winning at home, even when there's not any fans in the stands, right? Beat the number 1 team in the country with 10,000 people in the stadium, right? They won not because of the environment or because they have a great home thing. It's because they're a better team
that day. Yeah,
and so bye weeks are one of the most overrated things. People say, we get extra time to prepare. Most teams don't take advantage of that.
They give guys the days off.
They give guys time off. They'll do like a couple extra days of practice. And the teams that do over prepare usually end up hurting themselves because they put more on. They try to do too much. Well, it doesn't mean you can't make some adjustments and things like that. But you're not reinventing who you are because you have a bye week.
Well, and a lot of times during that bye week, practices that they have, a lot of times those are geared towards the younger guys. You know what I mean? Because it allows those older guys to kind of take a step back and kind of relax a little bit, and they gear it more towards the younger guys. If I was to compare it to something, I would compare it to like a couple of practices that they have during bowl prep. Right. Where it's not always the starters, that kind of thing. Again, you've been on staffs, you've seen coaches, I've seen coaches that during a bye week, they get all outside themselves and they try to do, bring in new schemes. And, that's not what good teams do.
Yeah. Because you end up practicing it. And then you end up not being good at it.
Right.
And then you have to go back to what you were, but you lost that practice time, focusing on what you do right.
That's just not how you operate on a bye week. So
I also want to make another comment too, Vince, about because we just finished up the second quarter, and this is something else I want to discuss. There's a comment from Rage Quit. He said, if we're talking about the likes of Cincinnati beating Notre Dame, then as a program, we have not progressed into the elite status yet. This is one of the most misguided comments that people make. Can I remind you that in the last 5 years, Ohio State lost to a Purdue team that had a losing record in a year where Ohio State went 13-1. Remind you that Clemson, the year they won the national championship, lost to Pitt. That in 2017, Clemson, who went to the college football playoff, lost to a 4-8 Syracuse team. The next year, they almost lost to a Syracuse again. Alabama has lost to some Auburn teams that weren't that good. Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, I think, twice in the last 5 years.
Yeah, they're their number.
Okay, that's not that fine. Oh, that one loss was to this. Normally, that's who you lose to. Oh, and by the way, in 2017, Ohio State lost to Iowa by like 31.
They got smoked by Iowa.
Taking one game and say, well, that defines you not being. No, that happens to everybody. It's whether or not you can or cannot win the big games is going to define whether you're not. And number two, I think that's also a mistake of looking at the name on the jersey, so to speak, or the helmet, and saying, well, they're not an elite team. So, you know, with all due respect, Cincinnati is a legitimate top 15 to top 20 caliber team. They are. So, yes, we should be talking about Cincinnati being a team that could potentially beat Notre Dame. And that doesn't mean that Notre Dame's not a great team. That's just simply saying, well, it's Cincinnati and ... whatever. Right. Or they're not Power 5. There are some Power 5 teams I would much rather play than some of the group of 16.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? I mean, when Arkansas was the opener last year, I was like, yeah, okay, let's go beat the Hogs. Like that game didn't bother me at all. And they're an SEC team. You know what I mean? Exactly. That's just an example I pulled off the top of my head. But yeah,
exactly. Exactly. So we have to understand is like that's setting up an agenda before without actually looking at the rest of how that's not how college football works. Right. And I just pointed that out. So anyway, back to quarter three, Vince. This is to me the second best quarter on the schedule.
Oh yeah. And
your point is absolutely right. The only thing that drags it down is Navy.
Right.
But the first two are very important because you know my stance, my and I kind of said it earlier. I've said it a lot in the past to you. I don't know how much I've said it publicly. When I get nervous about upsets, it's when you're playing a team that can score.
Yep.
Teams like when you talk about when Clemson lost to Pitt, they didn't lose 17-13. They lost like 45-42 or something like that, or 43-42. When Ohio State lost to Purdue, they gave up over 40 points. When they got upset by Iowa, they gave up over 50 points, I believe. That's usually what happens when great teams get upset. Is they usually get upset by somebody that can score.
And you just can't keep up. Like exactly.
And these are the two best offenses on the schedule.
Yes. And that's what worries the mess out of me is because they can score. And I've seen it too many times where teams just get behind the eight ball and they can't catch up and they start pressing and it's just not good. And you keep digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. And look, USC, for all of their faults, all of their faults, and that includes the head coach, they can score the football and they can score quick. And so I'm not going to be happy about that game until, if and when Notre Dame wins that game, that they've put USC away, because they can score in bunches and they can
we saw that fast. In 2019. I mean, Notre Dame was up like 17-3 at halftime and jumped up early. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I hope USC doesn't get the ball back again because they're going to tie this thing up. It can get a little bit nerve-wracking.
Exactly.
But see, to me, that's when we're going to learn a lot about the Notre Dame offense in those two games.
Right.
Notre Dame can beat Cincinnati and Wisconsin scoring 27-30 points. They can. Those teams are not elite offenses. My concern about Cincinnati is that they can rip off big plays. They're not going to rip off big plays for 4 quarters.
And I don't think they're going to have sustained drives and things. I just don't.
Yeah, I'm more concerned with Cincinnati. I'm more concerned with the big plays and turnovers.
Right. Okay.
That's my concern because of the defense. Right. So if they can rip off 2 big plays in that game that set up 2 scores, and then they have one good drive that sets up a field goal, another turnover that sets up a field goal, and then a turnover that sets up a touchdown. That's all of a sudden that's 27 points. That's good enough to beat Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's offense isn't what we think it is, or if Notre Dame's turning the ball over a lot. And I have to admit, Adrian Martinez is freaking awful, by the way, the quarterback for Nebraska. He stinks so bad. I'm watching this game and I'm thinking, man, they wish they had Pat Dillingham right now. But he had a receiver on a crossing route that literally, if it's a 5-yard cross, Vince, and he throws it to the guy's running. No, he threw it like 8 feet over his head.
Oh gosh!
The guy's running a 5-yard crossing route, and if he catches it, there's literally no one on the left side of the field. Threw it like 5 feet, like literally 5-6 feet over his head. And then he just fumbled, and Illinois picked it up and ran it back for a touchdown.
Is this the beginning of the end for Scott Frost?
I mean,
we're going way off board.
Let's see if he comes back and wins this game. But yeah, he can't develop a quarterback.
Yeah, that's the problem.
But back to this.
Yeah,
that won't be the issue against USC and North Carolina.
Right, because that's their best players. Yeah.
Now, again, I think Keaton Slove's a little overrated. He doesn't stink. By any stretch of the imagination, he's a good quarterback. He's going to put up numbers. He can run that offense well. I think he's overrated from like a Heisman NFL draft standpoint. He's really good for that system, though.
Let me ask you this question real quick, and I know it's off target, but we're talking about USC. Do you think that they should have had Slovis in over JT Daniels?
No,
I feel like JT Daniels is the better quarterback.
No, that's a coach who said I'm going to run my system, and that guy doesn't fit my system.
Okay, this
guy does.
Okay,
and JT was coming off of an injury.
I get that too, but he's still a better quarterback.
So,
but yeah,
by far. But I don't know if JT's an air raid quarterback though. At least the way that Graham Harrell wants to run the air raid. I think that was a huge mistake. I'd be way more nervous about USC right now if JT Daniels was
Me too. Oh, me too.
Way more nervous.
Me too. I remember watching his high school highlights.
Oh gosh,
because he was throwing to Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? And I remember watching that, thinking to myself, "Oh my Lord!" And I think he was a freshman or a sophomore at the time. I mean,
because he skipped his senior year to go to
senior year.
When he played against Notre Dame in 2018, he should have been a senior in high school.
Yeah, and he did a really good job in that
first half of that game for sure. That game went down because Notre Dame dominated them in the trenches after the first quarter. But when he could sit back there early in that game and kind of pick Notre Dame apart, Notre Dame they were down like 10-0 at one point in time. It
seemed like he was just finding all these open guys. Anyway, I digress. I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Looking at USC, this is a good football team. I predict USC to be a top 15 to 20 caliber team preseason. I think there's a couple things that have to go right for them to live up to that. Number one, they have to stay healthy. They are a thin team. And number two, I still have some question marks about their defense. I like Todd Orlando as a coach. I think last year hurt him because he goes to USC. They have no spring ball. They have no offseason. They have the shortened season. It was we've said this before. If you're a Big Ten or Pac-12 coach, last year was the worst year to be a first-year coach. Worst year. And Todd Orlando is a first-year coach. Now, they come into this season. They've got an injured nose tackle. Brandon Peely's hurt. Then the freshman that was supposed to start transfers. They've got some issues on the D-line on the interior. Really good edge players, especially Drake Jackson, who's an outstanding edge player. But then you look at the rest of their defense. They got very good skill in the secondary. I have question marks about the middle of their defense and the front two levels, Vince. That's, to me, is a big concern for them. Offensively, I think they have an experienced offensive line. It's just not a very good offensive line. Mm-hmm. If Notre Dame is going to win this game, that's where it's going to be. It's those two matchups. Because USC doesn't scare me skill-wise the way that they used to, where they just got better skill players than Notre Dame. No, they don't. They do not have better skill players than Notre Dame right now. That doesn't mean that they don't have good enough skill players that if you make mistakes, they can beat you. They can. But USC, to me, it's going to be about, can Notre Dame play to its potential in the trenches? If they don't play to its potential in the trenches, this game is going to be far more difficult than it should be.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's going to be a la what, and I can't remember what year. You're so much better at this. You and Lou always pick me up when it comes to remembering games. But the game where Notre Dame just absolutely dominated USC in the trenches.
2017.
When Quentin Nelson was just, guys were quitting left and right. And I'm not
the no Moss game because USC's D-line literally they had guys turning their backs at the snap, just taking hits.
Yes, it was bad. I see that at freshman football, right? These are major D1 college players.
Guys that got one of those. Rasheem Green got drafted in the third round,
right? And
he's just I've had enough of this Quentin Nelson guy.
Yeah. So I'm not saying the offensive line is going to dominate like that, okay? But I am saying the defensive line is going to dominate like that. And I think that's where this game, like you said, it's where it's won and lost. And I don't know that they're going to be able to get a whole lot going because of that. And so, I mean, we'll see how it goes, obviously. But that's where my confidence level is for Notre Dame versus USC is in the trenches. I'm very confident there. And I think that they could get this one over earlier than maybe the experts say. Of course, I like Notre Dame.
It's possible. I think it's possible. And that's what I'm saying, Vince. I agree with you. You're going to have to dominate in the trenches. You can't make this a skill game.
And hopefully by now the offensive line is, I think, hopefully by now the offensive line has kind of, we'll know who they are at that point.
This will be the stretch we learn that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they will have been back. If they survive the Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech games,
right,
then this is when we should see them start to kind of really ascend as a unit. But that's the key, Vince. You have to win in the trenches. If this becomes a perimeter game, I still think Notre Dame wins, but it becomes a lot more, lot more risky. And then now all of a sudden your mistakes really hurt you. Turnovers, not getting points on the drive, selling for field goals. Those things really hurt you if you're not dominating USC's offense in the trenches.
Yes, because you do not want to get in a shootout with USC. Right. That's not where you want to be. And I'm not saying Notre Dame can't win a shootout. They can.
It's not where you want to be.
It's just not where I want to be. That's not the game I want to see in that night.
North Carolina is interesting to me because
I think the hype train is way too high on North Carolina. That's how I feel.
Here's my
Notre Dame
on Carolina.
Handled North Carolina last year, and they lost all the guys that made them good on offense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the handling North Carolina thing, I agree with that. But I don't think that always necessarily means that it's going to translate the next year. The thing for North Carolina for me is there's a lot of hype about their defense is going to be so much better. That's going to be the key for North Carolina. If that's true, then that's going to make this a much more competitive game. I just don't buy it.
Yeah.
I don't think Jay Bateman's the defensive – and this could be my own personal experiential bias with Jay Bateman, but I just never have thought he's a very good coordinator. I think he's an overrated coordinator. And partly it's because I faced him once and we put up like 600 yards on him. And I've never watched – Army, they were tough. They play hard and all that. But I've never watched them wow, they're schemed up so well and they're so good and – I think his kids play hard. I think he's got some interesting stuff schematically that kind of helps mask that they don't have great players. But I've just never bought into the whole Jay Bateman's a great coach thing. And I don't think their talent is as good as people make it out to be. And their best players are still really, really young.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is the bigger question
that
I have about North Carolina. But before we continue talking about North Carolina, John A1 hit us with a super chat. He said, "Happy Saturday, Irish Breakdown. Would you rather have the dominant offensive line like Notre Dame in 2017 or a dominant D line like Clemson in 2018? Vince, go ahead.
I can raise my hand like I'm in school.
I'm curious if we disagree on this one. Go ahead.
For me, this is a no-brainer. It didn't even take me a second to think about it. It's the defensive line in 2018.
Wow.
Because
okay, well, I was thinking we were going to have our first big argument of the season. You totally ruined it.
Well, you know why I think this is because of the conversations that you and I have had about how to scheme around an average to good offensive line.
2018 Clemson offensive line was solid.
Yeah,
that's it.
Right, and
that's it.
You can't really scheme against a really, really good defensive line.
Can't win if your quarterback's on his backside the whole game.
Yeah, exactly. And you can scheme around an average offensive line.
That is a great question, though.
It's a great question. It's a great question because I think this, and I'm sure this is why John asked it, is because of what Notre Dame has this year, right? They could potentially have a dominant defensive line, and they could have a better than average, offensive line.
Can I say something now? So that was my answer from just a big picture standpoint.
Okay.
For this Notre Dame team specifically, my answer would be the complete opposite.
Really?
Because I think this Notre Dame team already has a great defensive line. I think the defense. So, to me, taking the 2018 Clemson line would make Notre Dame's strength stronger. You see what I'm saying?
So you're saying you can take one of these and add it to Notre Dame now?
Yeah. So what I did was I took the big picture. Which, if I'm starting a team, which one would I want to have? I would take the 2018 Clemson,
and that's what I did. Yeah.
Now I'm taking a second answer. I'm turning the question around a little bit and saying, okay, but what about this specific Notre Dame team?
Okay.
What would I do to this specific Notre Dame team? My answer is the opposite. Because I'm not going to take my strength and make it stronger. I'm going to keep my strength a strength, and I'm going to make an area that's a question mark a strength.
Oh yeah,
because if you take the elite Notre Dame defensive line, and honestly, I would have done the same in 2018. I would have taken the 2017 offensive line. Because that's the thing about Notre Dame specifically is they've had really good defensive lines. Notre Dame's defensive line wreaked a lot of havoc on Clemson that day. A lot of havoc in 2018. And Trevor Lawrence was running for his life the whole game.
Right.
But Notre Dame couldn't move the ball on offense. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, the 2017 O-line wouldn't have made any difference because they still needed a quarterback that could throw the ball. But to this specific Notre Dame team, I would say you give me the 2017 offensive line with the skill they have, and Notre Dame is already really good on the D-line. Now, is the 2018 Clemson team better? Yeah, way better. But this is still, to me, one of the 10 best, if not potentially 5 best, defensive lines in the country. You see what I'm saying, Vince? So that's 100%. That's where I'm coming from. So there's the big picture, which one would I take? And then there's the specific to this, the makeup of this Notre Dame team. That would be now next year. My answer is probably going to be different because next year you're probably not going to have Jason Adamiola. You're not going to have Heinous. You're not going to have Myron Tungavalo. My answer may be different, but for this specific team,
interesting,
it'd be the 2017 offensive line. So that's what I love about questions like this because you could take it different ways and get different answers.
Love it.
That's what makes it a great question. So John, thank you for that.
Love it.
That was a really good one. All right, so Vince, so back to North Carolina. To me, I actually think North Carolina's offense is still going to be pretty good. I think the problem that I have with people predicting them to be this top 10 team and all this other kind of stuff is because
it's because of Sam Howell and it's because of
it's because of the defense. I think people are predicting it because of the defense. And the reason I say that is because their offense was pretty darn good last year. And I don't think people are, but they gave up 29.4 points per game.
Right.
I think that they're going to be, and part of their thing too is they're 41.7 points per game. That was hurt because they only scored 27 in the bowl game. They scored 27 against this Texas A&M defense that everybody keeps telling me is this great defense, and that's why they're a title contender in 2021 and all this other stuff. Right? They scored 27 against that Texas A&M defense without Javonte Williams, without Michael Carter, without De'Ami Brown. That those three guys that they're missing now, they still scored 27 points. I like this offense. I think Ty Chandler, the transfer from Tennessee, is a good football player. Sam Howell is a good football player. He's, again, I don't see top 5 NFL draft pick, but I see it. I see a really good college football player. They've got Joshua Downs, who's an ascending sophomore, Coffrey Brown, who's an ascending sophomore, both big play guys. They got Bo Corrales coming back, who was a good football player for them in 2019. He got hurt last year. And they've got, I think, 4 or 5 starters coming back on the offensive line. Now, it's not a great offensive line. It's a lot like that really good, like the 2018 Clemson offensive line. There's no future first or second round draft pick, but it's just solid. 5 veteran guys that know how to play together.
They're just solid.
And so I do think this offense is really good. And I'm bringing this up because if the defense is going to make the improvement that a lot of national analysts are assuming they're going to make, that's going to make this a much tougher game because this team can score. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to hold them to 17 points again like they did last year. I think they caught some breaks. I think North Carolina missed some opportunities. And I think the North Carolina offensive line wasn't as good last year as it's going to be this year with these guys all having some experience under their belts.
Okay.
That's where I come from on this one. So I think this is going to be the best offense they're going to face all year, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's schemed well. Phil Longo's a smart coach. They got a great trigger man, and they've got athletes. And as I've said, look, the reason I'm saying I have to be fair, I have said for years that I don't care about experience at receiver. I care about talent. Well, they don't have a lot of experience coming back at receiver, but they got a lot of talent coming back at receiver. So if I'm going to say that about Notre Dame, I got to say that about North Carolina too, right? And this is going to be game, 8?
Yeah.
Those guys are going to have a lot under their belts. And so I think that factors into it as well. And when you look at North Carolina's schedule, these kids are going to be tested a little bit. They're going to play at Virginia Tech, home against Virginia, home against Georgia Tech. They'll have played Florida State at home. They'll have played Miami at home. Now, another reason why I think this game's going to be good for Notre Dame is if you look at North Carolina's schedule, I don't believe they play a game away from home. They play Virginia Tech in the opener. I believe they play Georgia Tech on a neutral field. And then all their other games are at home.
So what you're saying is they're probably going to be undefeated, and it's going to be a ranked opponent for Notre Dame.
I don't think they're going to be undefeated because I don't think they're. I mean, Miami's going to want blood. At Virginia Tech's going to be a tough game. My point is one of the things working in Notre Dame's favor is this is a North Carolina team who hasn't necessarily played well away from home.
Oh, okay.
And you look at last year, for example, they lost at Florida State. They almost lost to Boston College. I mean, Phil Jerkovic and BC.
That was that overtime game, wasn't it? Or it went down to the wire?
I don't know if it wasn't overtime.
It was a bunch of scores at the end.
Phil threw 3 touchdown passes on the last drive.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes, that's what it was.
And then made it 24-22. It wasn't overtime. It was the end of the fourth quarter. They went for 2 to try to tie it. He got picked, and they ran it back for 6 because nobody was open. He just tried to force a ball. Then the next road game is at Florida State. They lost. Their next road game was at Virginia. They lost. And then they played against Miami on the road at the end of the year and won. That was the anomaly. Then they went on the away from home again in the bowl game and lost. This is a team that hasn't played well away from home.
Okay.
We're going to find out if that's going to change a little bit because they open up next weekend at Virginia Tech.
Right.
But I still say I don't know if this is – and when North Carolina almost beat Clemson 2 years ago in 2019, again, that was at home. So I don't think this is a team that plays great away from home.
Okay.
And that's another reason why
it should be a great atmosphere at Notre Dame.
Night, but the question's going to be the defense. I think their offense is going to be every bit as good, if not better, than it was last year at scoring. Now, I don't think it necessarily makes them a better offense than it was last year individually, but as a unit, I think they're going to be better because the line's going to be a lot better, in my opinion. So anyway, that's kind of where I look at it with those 2 games is your defense is going to get tested a lot. Yeah. And here's the thing about those 2 games. They're both air raid offenses. Now they're very different air raid offenses. Graham Harrell's is we don't care about running the ball. Phil Longo's is we got to run the ball. But still air raid. Tempo, push the tempo, come at you, attack, perimeter, RPOs, all that stuff, take shots. USC is very much a short. Air raid for North Carolina is more let's look for some shots. So there's a lot about it, but the things that stress you are the same. Tempo, perimeter, misdirection, spreading the field, all that stuff is still the same. The concern I have about this 2-game stretch is when it follows the physical stretch that we saw before with Wisconsin and Virginia Tech does this wear Notre Dame down to where they're more ripe for an upset in quarter 4 away from home?
Interesting.
That could be one of those side effects of this stretch. Even if Notre Dame wins them, between the physical pounding you took in quarter 2, now the speed and the running that you have to do in quarter 3, that my number 2 trap game is the next game. The first game of quarter 4, which is the second game in Virginia. Those are my 2 that I look at and say those are the 2 trap games of teams that Notre Dame should not lose to, that they'd have to play poorly to lose to, but are games where I could see that happening. That is at Virginia.
Okay. Interesting.
So that kicks off quarter 4.
Let's say let's kick off quarter 4. Absolutely, because I'm just not going to waste the airwaves on Navy. I love Navy. I love everything about that.
Love Ken Niumatalolo.
Yeah, me too. They're just not competitive right now. We'll just call it what it is, right? So going into quarter 4, as you mentioned, the November 13th, they go to Charlottesville and play Virginia, which it's TBA right now. Good chance that's a night game. November 20th, Georgia Tech at home. That'll be the final home game for Notre Dame. That is obviously senior night day, all of that pomp and circumstance that goes along with that. And then they finish it off, as they always do, in an odd-numbered year out in Palo Alto, Stanford. And if Notre Dame does what we hope they will do, that will also be a night game. So November 27th for that one. So they just have the one bye this year, right? Am I counting that right, Brian?
Notre Dame, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just got the one bye before the USC game.
Because they start later. Normally when they'll start like the August 31st or September 1st.
Week 0. Yeah, okay.
And that's more of a college football thing.
Right.
Than it is just a Notre Dame thing. There's just some of those years where they have 2 byes and some where they only have 1.
Yep, so one bye this year, finishing off Virginia, Georgia Tech, Stanford. I am less worried about this stretch. I understand where you're coming from with Virginia being,
because it's not about those teams. It's about
the situation.
Right. And I think Georgia Tech's a little bit more dangerous than people think.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I have no respect at this point for I shouldn't say no respect. That's not the right terminology. I am not in any way worried about Stanford. Notre Dame has Stanford's number. Stanford is.
I thought you were going to say Georgia Tech, and we were going to have a conversation.
No.
But no, right.
It's just they're heading in the wrong direction. I don't know what they do to fix it at this point. That's not my problem. It's just Stanford Notre Dame is not a competitive series right now, and I don't think it's going to be one in the near future. Mm-hmm. So that game doesn't bother me at all. The Virginia game, I think Virginia is ascending, from where they've been in the past. I'm not saying that Notre Dame's ripe for an upset or anything like that, but I think Virginia is getting better. I do think that. And this game is obviously at Virginia. So, it could be competitive depending on how Notre Dame takes it. And then I'll let you talk about Georgia Tech a little bit more specifically, but that's Notre Dame's final home game of the season.
Yeah, the Virginia game is, again, it's one of those trap games. It's kind of like, and when I talk about it, it's like Ohio State going to Purdue or going to Iowa, or Clemson going, playing Pitt, thinking they've arrived, and Clemson going to Syracuse, and their quarterback goes down, and next thing you know, they're losing to Syracuse.
Right.
It's like Alabama a couple years ago being down to Ole Miss like 24-3 in like the second quarter. Those things happen. And you're 9-0. You've beaten Cincinnati, Wisconsin, North Carolina, all these good teams. USC. Yeah. Of course, we're going to beat Virginia. Well, they have some ingredients that concern me. They're not a super explosive offense, so that part's not there. They have a mobile quarterback. My stance on mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah.
They're a very well-coached football team. They play hard, and they're very experienced. I mean, they have a lot of guys on this defense coming back that played against Notre Dame 2 years ago at Notre Dame. Noah Taylor, Joey Blunt, a lot of those guys like that are good, experienced football players. They're good in the trenches. They've gotten better in the trenches, I should say. And it's one of those games where, as we saw in Notre Dame played them in 2015, that was a bad Virginia team. But Notre Dame had fumbles, they had turnovers, they gave up big plays. They let Virginia stay in a game. Notre Dame scores to go up 26-12, and then the starting quarterback gets hurt. Virginia claws back in. If Malik doesn't get hurt, Notre Dame blows Virginia out. Yeah. That's the thing that, it's one of those games where if a couple bad things happen, this is that game. I mean, who'd have thought that Notre Dame could lose to BC a week after beating Florida State, right?
Yeah.
That's my concern.
No one.
That's why those games concern me. It's you look at what was it, Georgia 2 years ago in 2019, right? I mean, they beat Notre Dame at home, right? Big win for Georgia in 2019. That year they also beat Florida, who was ranked 6th. They went on the road and beat Auburn. And then who do they lose to in the regular season? The only regular season loss they had, 4-8 South Carolina at home. That's what I keep trying to tell everybody. Like, that's what I love about college football.
Right.
It's like
it's any given Sunday thought like that.
Right.
And I realize that's an NFL term, but you get my point.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think is sometimes gets missed when people say, well, you're not going to lose to that team. Well, you don't watch enough other college football. Because Bama doesn't lose to Georgia. Bama doesn't lose to Florida. They don't lose to the best teams they play. They lose to that team. You're like, how did that team beat Alabama? How did that team beat Clemson?
Yeah,
right? Like, I mean, if I were to say, hey, do you know the last team to beat Clemson? Would your guess be in the regular season in the conference before Notre Dame beat them? Would you know would you have guessed Syracuse?
Syracuse. Yeah, exactly.
Well, who before then? Would your guess first? Pitt. Would that be your first thought if you didn't follow it? You'd be like, well, is it Miami, right? North Carolina, Florida State, right? No. Louisville when they had Lamar, right? Nope. Syracuse. 4-8 Syracuse.
Yeah.
Before that, it was Pitt.
It wasn't. Yeah, it's not even a Syracuse team that was good.
Lamar could beat Clemson.
Yeah.
But the guy at Pitt could. You know what I mean? So those are the things I look at and say, and it's like, look, that's what I love about college football. Ohio State's last regular season loss in conference was 2018 to Purdue, who finished 6-7. It's the last time Ohio State lost a regular season game in conference. And so that's why I keep telling people, like, look, I mean, Deshaun Watson lost to flipping Nathan Peterman the year that Deshaun won a championship. You know what I mean?
It's college football, man.
That's what I love about college football.
Yeah. Right.
So that's why these games scare me, Vince. It's because it's the game where you think you can. It's the letdown game. Well, it's the biggest cliche around. But as I just pointed out, that cliche is a cliche for a reason, because that's the game that these best teams are losing.
My issue is you get through that stretch that we just talked about, right? And it's almost like a
right. That's like the concern.
It's an exhale. It's an exhale that like, hey man, we did it. We just got 4 games left. These guys are nothing compared to what we just did. And then they go out and lay an egg. And that happens. That happens, people. Like that. Yep. And Brian just explained, gave you prime examples as to how that happens and why it happens and all of that. These kids they're kids. They're kids, right? And so, I look, am I going to sit here and predict that Notre Dame is going to lose specifically to one of those teams? No, I'd have to have my head examined if I was like, Notre Dame is losing to Virginia.
Georgia Tech. They're going to go 11-1 and lose to Georgia Tech.
Like, people be like, what are you talking about? But would I be surprised if it happened? No. Would I be upset? Yeah, of course I would.
But see, here's the thing, though, Vince. If you know what? I'm going to hold off until we make our predictions.
Fair enough. Okay.
But yes.
Okay. So that takes us to the end of the quarter section. Now, I want to ask you, Brian, we talked about this a little bit beforehand. What 3-game stretch? And it doesn't have to be the 3-3-3-3, right?
It doesn't have to be in a quarter.
Right. So what 3-game stretch to you is the one that you kind of have circled that could be the most difficult for Notre Dame?
Well, I don't know if I'd say most difficult, but I said most defining.
Oh, okay. I like that. Okay.
I think it's going to be you're going to not like this. It's going to be Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, USC.
I know. Yeah. Yep.
I just don't think Wisconsin is good enough to beat Notre. And I could be wrong. I just don't see it. I don't think that they're going to lose to a team that has inferior athletes.
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, that's not what's happened in Notre Dame. Georgia had athletes that could hang with Notre Dame. Michigan even to a degree, but again, I kind of throw the Michigan game out because that game was just weird. The weather and all this other kind of stuff. To me, the teams that concern me are the teams that can score, that have athletes.
Yeah,
and absolutely. To me, that's that stretches that's the 3 most athletic teams that you play. And I think that if you're through that stretch with 0 or only 1 loss, then Notre Dame's a playoff team.
Right.
If they have a loss before that stretch, or they get through that stretch with a loss, assuming that loss is not to USC. If they get beat by Cincinnati, or if they get beat, I think the Cincinnati loss would hurt them. But if they get upset by like a Virginia Tech, or say Wisconsin beats them, they beat Cincinnati, they beat USC, they beat Virginia Tech, they beat North Carolina. That Wisconsin loss is now in the back rear view. Sure. That's the other reason Wisconsin is not on this list.
Because you don't think it'll hurt them.
Because if they lose that game, it's so early that if they run the table, they're still in the playoff.
Because it's September. It's still in September.
Right.
Is that game? Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. It's funny for me. I was trying to pick out a 3-game stretch here. And I was kind of jumping back and forth. I don't wish, because that would be a very difficult 3-game stretch. But I wish we could take the Virginia Tech game out and just bump up USC North Carolina. Then for me, it would have been Cincinnati, USC, North Carolina. And I feel almost like I'm doing North Carolina a disservice by leaving them out. But I had the same 3 games that you did, because. And I know I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I talked about how important the Wisconsin game was, and I still believe it's important. But my issue, and you said it, and it's been my issue all along, is that I'm afraid of teams that can score. And I am in no way afraid of Wisconsin scoring the football.
Right.
I just look at that as the first big game for Notre Dame, and how it's going to be defining for them.
You're looking at it truly from a coaching standpoint, which is that's the first one.
Yeah, right.
I get it.
But I'm for Notre Dame, and really anytime, I'm afraid of teams that can put the ball in the end zone.
Right.
Because if you have an off day, and if you can't keep up with them.
So Vince, let me interrupt you real quick, because I want to see if I can hone you in. So It sounds to me that if we're talking about defining, not toughest, because I think you and I would agree the toughest stretch is Wisconsin and Virginia Tech. That's the toughest stretch. The most defining stretch, however, from what I'm hearing from you, is actually Virginia Tech, USC, and North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah.
For similar reasons why I said Wisconsin. So I think that's what you're trying to say. Now, let me get y'all going down that road.
It's like I said, I'm afraid of teams that can score. And if Notre Dame gets through, again, it's almost like a breathe of relief, right, to a degree. Because I'm not saying that Notre Dame's going to look past anybody. I'm not going down that road at all. But USC scares the you know what out of me. It scares the bejesus out of me because they can score. And if you lose to your rival, your big rival, because look, we can have that conversation if you want, but USC is the biggest rival Notre Dame has, in my opinion. You lose to your rival, and they put a thumping on you by just outscoring you. I think that's going to really hurt the psyche of this Notre Dame team, and then they're going to go play, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's going to be a tough stretch if they blow it against USC. And by blow it, I mean lose, right? Mm-hmm. Going up against especially at home, right? And then you got North Carolina at home. That game is a whole different animal now, the North Carolina game. So the U.S., that stretch, that bothers me, that worries me. And, you've got me a little bit more uptight about Cincinnati. But, again, it's teams that can score on Notre Dame.
I think, too, for me, it's also – that's the stretch you cannot have for a loss.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame loses a game, it can't be then.
Because you're getting into the later part of the season.
Yes.
You're getting into mid to late October.
Yes.
USC's October 23rd. North Carolina's October 30th. Like, you don't have many games left after that from a significance standpoint. Because, you go out and beat Navy, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Stanford. People are like, but they lost to, USC and North Carolina. Like,
late.
Yeah, that's not going to do anything to repair your image. Your season's over at that point.
Data-wise, Clemson and Alabama have both suffered late losses and made the playoff. Right? It was Alabama in 2017. They lost to Auburn late, and then Clemson, obviously, as we talked earlier, lost to Pitt late. That was like November. But those teams get the benefit of the doubt that I don't think Notre Dame would get.
Agreed,
and that's the difference.
Yep.
The other thing, too, is Clemson was ranked number 1 at the time. So I'm pretty sure. I'm looking that up now. It looks like they were actually ranked number 3. But when they lost that game by a point, they fell to number 5. I don't see Notre Dame going from 3 to 5 if they lose to USC, North Carolina, or Virginia Tech. But they'll fall further than that.
Beating Wisconsin and Cincinnati. So let's say they're undefeated going into that USC game, right? Mm-hmm. Do you really believe they're going to be a top 3 team at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For multiple reasons, but yes, when I say top 3, I'm referring to the committee, which the committee, I don't care about the AP poll. I don't. I mean, I don't care what ESPN thinks. I'm looking at the college football playoff.
And that comes out in middle of October, right? I mean,
November 2nd. November 2nd.
Okay.
So Tuesday, November 2nd, that means it will come out right after that stretch of 3 games.
Yeah.
Where Notre Dame just took an L.
Yeah.
Right? If Notre Dame's loss was to Wisconsin or Cincinnati, those are all a month or longer away from the first poll coming out. That's the difference.
Yeah, right.
Whereas if they lose to North Carolina, the first poll's that next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's not good. That is not good at all. If you lost a home game, that's not good.
Right. So that's kind of where I come from. And then that's the concern that I have. Whereas I think an earlier loss, if Notre Dame's going to lose a game, it needs to be early.
Yeah.
And again, people say, well, you're going to fall in the AP poll. We've proven, the committee has proven, as much as ESPN hates to, well, they won't admit it, but as much as ESPN hates it, the committee has proven time and time again, they don't care what ESPN thinks.
Right.
Remember the heads that exploded last year when BYU was ranked way down when the first poll, and they're like, I can't believe, I thought BYU'd be top 10 for sure, and they're just losing their minds.
It's ridiculous.
And then BYU finally plays a good team, and in Coastal Carolina, and they lose.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, who'd BYU beat? The committee does not care. Remember when Kirk Herbstreit was like pound on the table, Georgia needs to be in the playoff with 2 losses, and the committee said, we don't care what you think. They've done it time and time again. They don't care what ESPN thinks as much as ESPN tries to manipulate the agenda. So I look at it and say, I'm just looking at it from a committee standpoint. They have shown in the past that if you lose early, unless you're one of the exceptions, Clemson, Bama,
and Notre Dame hasn't earned that exception.
Correct.
I'm saying
have not. Yes,
they have not.
That. More often than not, teams that lose early are the ones that get in.
Sure.
Ohio State lost to an unranked Virginia Tech team. This is another example of the whole, if you're not an elite team if you lose to Cincinnati. I'll take Cincinnati 2021 over 2014 Virginia Tech any day of the week. That team went 7-6. But one of their 7 wins was over Ohio State. What did Ohio State do that year? They won a national championship. So,
how about this? In 2017 Notre Dame, right? They lost to Georgia early, and they're considered one of the top teams in the country until they
climbed all the way up to number 3.
Right.
Well, the same thing was true in 2015 as well, Vince. Notre Dame lost to Clemson but that was on the road to a highly ranked team, and they still were in the top 3.
Right.
If you climb up early and you run the table, if you lose early and then run the table, you're going to be better off. If you're a Notre Dame, again, Clemson and Alabama are rightfully viewed differently. And even that 2016 Clemson team hadn't won a title yet, but that 2016 Clemson team had given Alabama everything that they could handle the year before in the championship game.
Right.
And that 2016 Clemson team also had some really impressive wins under their that year. Remember, they beat Auburn that year, who was very good. They beat Lamar Jackson and Louisville that year. They beat Florida State that year. And then they went out in the college football playoff the ACC championship and beat a top 20 Virginia Tech team. They had a lot of big wins, that team did. And so when you can kind of win those kind of games, and I think that was the year Lamar won the Heisman Trophy. That's why they were able to overcome that late loss. It was those combination of things. Notre Dame doesn't have that, in my opinion.
Right.
And so again, I point to that and I say, look, I think that's why they're given the benefit of the doubt. I don't think Notre Dame gets that. I think it's better for Notre Dame to be a playoff team if they lose early.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It doesn't mean they can't get in, because again,
I get that.
There's a lot of things could happen this year, and that's what we're going to get into when we get into our that other part of what we're going to talk about. But that's what's I just would be a lot more nervous if Notre Dame loses during that stretch of Virginia Tech to North Carolina, in your view, or in my view, Cincinnati to USC.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So, but I think if I kind of like where you're at though with the Virginia Tech to Carolina. Again, I think you swung me a little bit on that one. I kind of like the thought of that, because I don't see them losing to both Cincinnati and Wisconsin.
Right. I agree with that.
If they were to lose to one, that makes that other even more defining.
Yeah.
If they beat Wisconsin and Cincinnati, I go with Virginia. Obviously, then the Virginia Tech to North Carolina becomes huge.
It becomes absolutely gigantic, because that's the last giant mountain you have.
Because if they run the table there, I just don't see them lose. I don't look, again, trying to provide good analysis. The Virginia is a team that can beat you if you don't play well. Georgia Tech's got some athletes with Jeff Sims at quarterback. Jameer Gibbs is the best running back I think Notre Dame's going to face this year. Got a lot of a lot of transfers, a lot of athletic recruits. But Georgia Tech could play their best game of the year and still lose to Notre Dame by 14 points.
Right.
Notre Dame would have to give one of those games away, and Brian Kelly's teams haven't really done that in normal conditions.
From 17 on, they just haven't done that.
From 18 on. I think they did that in 17. I think they gave the Stanford game away at the end of 2017 and the Miami game. But from 2018 on,
that's fair.
That's not the kind of game they lose. I mean, again, Brian Kelly has not lost a game against a team that finished unranked since 2016. That's something else that people aren't discussing enough of. Of course, talk about Notre Dame losing 3-4 games.
Right.
So anyway, so that's it for the schedule, Vince. Now it comes down to the moment you've been avoiding for an hour and a half.
I have been.
It's time to give your prediction for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
What is Notre Dame's record, first and foremost?
Are we going to go game by game, or are we going just overall record? Because that makes me happier. Okay. So overall record, I know if I say 12-0, people are going to be like, homer.
Dude, I don't care what people think.
I know.
Notre Dame's going undefeated record season 2 last. If you think 12-0, then go 12-0.
Here, I want you to hear my thought process, okay? I'm going to go through this real quick. So if we went game by game, there's not a game on the schedule I don't think Notre Dame wins. There's just not. Game by game, Notre Dame should be favored in every one of those games, and they should win every one of those games. Do I think Notre Dame will trip up at some point? Yeah, I guess I do. I think that they're going to have a loss in there somewhere. But if you're asking me to pick which game, I don't know what game it's going to be. I really don't. So my prediction for the season is 11-1 because I just am not comfortable. Like, as I watch practice and as we talk about the team, I'm not comfortable saying, yep, that's an undefeated team. You know what I mean? But again, game by game, I feel like they should win each of those games. So I'm going to say 11-1 because I feel like they're going to trip up at some point. Something's going to bite them, in the butt. It's going to be a Forrest Gump, situation where he gets shot in the butt, right? It's going to be somewhere. So I'm going to say 11-1 as the regular season final total.
I'm going to give two predictions.
Okay. All right.
My main one is I believe Jack Cohn is going to be a really good quarterback.
Me too. Yeah.
And I think if I'm accurate on that, I think they go 12-0. If he's as good as I think he is, I do think they run the table.
Okay.
If Jack Cohn's not as good as I think he is, I think they go 10-2. I don't think they go 11-1. I think they go one or the other. I think if he's not as good as I think, they'll lose 2 games. They'll lose to one of the good teams, and they'll be upset by somebody. So, like, Wisconsin and Virginia Tech, or Virginia Tech and North Carolina, something like that. If Jack Cohn's as good as I think he is, I agree 100% with you. And I've been saying that all season, 11-1, 11-1, 11-1, all off season. I've been saying it. But I just can't point to the team that should beat Notre Dame.
Believe me, that's my issue. That's the problem.
Too. But that also belief comes with the thought that they're going to be better quarterback.
Right. If
Jack Cohn's not an upgraded quarterback, I think the offensive line issues, I think the injury to Marist, and then the fact that they're an injury to a Kyle Hamilton or a Kevin Austin or, a Jarrett Patterson away from being a 2-3 loss team.
Oh, that I agree with.
Right.
Yeah.
I think Notre Dame can sustain injuries at a lot of places.
Right.
Notice I didn't say Jack Cohn in there.
Right.
I don't think they can sustain a Kyle Hamilton loss early in the season. I don't think they can sustain a Jarrett Patterson loss early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I kind of see it as if Jack Cohn's as good as I think he is, I can't project injuries that I don't know of.
Of course.
I just can't point to a team that beats them, especially since 3 of the 4 best teams they play are at home.
Right. And I think that's huge. I think the fact that their games are at home, and
their 4 toughest games are none of them are true road games.
Right. Exactly.
If the game was at Camp Randall, I might feel a little bit differently about that Wisconsin game. Just because that environment was.
Well, even if it was up in Lambeau. I mean, if it was up in Wisconsin, like in the heart of Wisconsin, that's another conversation.
But I still feel like that there'd been a lot of Notre Dame fans at that game, though. That's the thing.
There would have been.
At Camp Randall, that's a 97% pro-Wisconsin crowd.
Of course.
That's the difference. This game's going to be in Chicago. It's going to be at least 50-50 Notre Dame. At least.
At the least.
And so I can't point to a game where they lose.
And I think regardless, unless there's a rash of injuries, I think the floor is 10-2. Mm-hmm. I would. Would I be surprised if they were 10-2? Not necessarily, because there would be reasons for it. If they have more than 2 losses, if they're 9-3 or more, that would surprise me, and it would surprise me.
That'd be a big step back, in my opinion.
It'd be a huge step back. We would have a different conversation in the offseason about this team and where they're at from a philosophy standpoint, from a program standard all of that. Like, we're having a different conversation.
We'd have to change our view on what Notre Dame's done the last 2 years. The thing about they played us off schedule would kind of be like, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It fits.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. Again, that's why for me it comes down to Jack Cohn. Because I feel like he is good enough to overcome a couple of the personnel issues that I have with this football team.
Mm-hmm.
O-line being one.
Sure.
If he's not the quarterback I think he is, then the offensive line not being great is going to hurt them more than
an issue. No.
And that's why I say it won't be 11-1. It'll be 12-0 or 10-2. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, me too.
I also say my first prediction gets Notre Dame back to, and I think 12-0 or 11-1 Notre Dame. If they're 11-1 and 12-0, I have Notre Dame in the college football playoff.
Right. Well, you're jumping the gun, buddy.
Yeah.
You're jumping the gun. Oh, we are supposed to say like what bowl they go into.
That's right.
That's my fault. I at 11-1, which was my prediction. I have them in the college football playoff as well. I don't see how a Notre Dame team who's 11-1 gets held out. And it's also because I think that some of those upper echelon teams, I don't know if they're going to go undefeated, right? I don't think that there's going to be 4 undefeated teams where it's like, yeah, clearly those 4 teams are the ones that need to be in the playoff. There's going to be debate amongst a couple of one-loss teams. And I think Notre Dame's resume, because they do have tough games, right? And I think they're going to win most of those games. If they have one loss, that means they obviously lost one of them, but they've won the rest. And I think that their resume is going to stack up against whoever that they're having this conversation about when they're trying to put the resumes next to each other with the one-loss teams to get in. I think Notre Dame gets in if they're 11-1.
Yeah. So that's it for the Notre Dame. So you're ultimately, you went 11-1, and you have Notre Dame in the college football playoff. I have them at 12-0 with, if Jack Cohn's as good as I think he is, at 12-0 in the college football playoff. So I'm saying it. I'm saying it now. I've been saying all summer I won't pick 12-0. I won't pick 12-0. I won't pick 12-0. But I just can't find the team that they're going to lose to, Vince. I know. I can't hypothetically say. So, like, to me, that's what I say. Like, look, if you're a great program, that should be the expectation. You're supposed to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Well, that's what Brian Kelly's done the last however many years. They beat, again, with the exception of Michigan. So if there's a hurricane game, they may lose that one. They've shown they don't handle weather very well. That's one of the big things, but I can't gauge that, right?
You can't predict the weather.
I can't predict that we're going to have an October where we're going to have an NC State, a Clemson, a Michigan, right? Okay, if that happens, then Notre Dame's probably going to lose because that's just what they've done in those games. But I can't project that.
Nobody can. That's nuts.
I can't project that they're going to lose 3 of their best players during the season with injuries. And I look at it and I say, I just don't see a team that has the horses on both sides of the ball to beat Notre Dame.
Right.
I don't. Now, will 11-1 be a disappointment for me? Nope.
Right.
Unless that one loss is like an embarrassing loss.
Right. Navy. They lose to Navy.
Oh, no, I mean like Wisconsin beat you 45-10.
Beat this. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cincinnati beat you by 17 on your home field, something like that. That's what I mean by embarrassing.
Okay.
Navy would also be embarrassing, but there's no evidence that Notre Dame is going to
I agree.
Since the 2016 turnover, there's no evidence of Notre Dame losing to a team like Navy.
I agree with that.
None.
Yeah.
And so it'd be more of like one of those 4 or 5 teams we talked about. I mean, that stretch, if they lose, it'll be for that stretch from Wisconsin to North Carolina. I think it'll be somewhere in there, in my opinion.
Okay.
So if that happens, then that's where we'll be.
So be it.
Yeah. So Vince 11-1 in the college football playoff, Brian 12-0 in the college football playoff. That is our prediction for the Notre Dame season. We broke it down. MVPs. We did a preview show on this, Vince. I went Kyron Williams and Jason Adamiola. You went similarly on offense, but you had a different defensive one.
Yes, I had Kyron Williams on offense, and I had Kyle Hamilton on defense.
Right, which makes total sense. I totally get that. And we obviously have had shows in the past breaking down sort of breakout players and top rookies and all that. Check those out. They're on our channel. They're also on our website, irishbreakdown.com. That's going to be it for the Notre Dame portion, but stick around because we are going to talk college football coming up here in the next 3 seconds. But that's going to be it for the Notre Dame portion of this preview. Vince.
Take a deep breath. Drinks.
I'm watching this. Nebraska, they're down 23-9 to Illinois. Now, first of all,
are you kidding
they're
me?
down 23-9 despite dominating Illinois in the trenches on defense. Their defense is killing Illinois' offense.
And I'm looking at the comments here from everybody, and somebody says Illinois' quarterback got hurt. Did he come back in?
Early. No, Artur Sikowski's still there. The kid that was at IMG that's now at Artur Sikowski is a guy that started in the Big Ten before. He was a top recruit. He played at IMG, so he's not like they put in some bum. But he's not the reason they're up. They're giving them short fields, and they're just missing opportunities and all those type of things.
All right. All right. I'm going to be watching some later.
Yeah.
I can't do 2 things at once, guys.
He just threw a bomb that I don't know if the guy was – okay, he just threw a great ball just now. Illinois is about to work Nebraska. This is not good. This is not good.
So Vince, that's a great segue because we're going to talk about all of college football, right? What?
Oh, Sorry, Nebraska's so bad. So Vince, let's dive into Nebraska. Our 2021 college football preview. Okay.
Yes.
We wrapped up our Notre Dame preview, and what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of go through and give our Power 5 conference predictions. We're going to do who we predict to win the divisions and then the championship games.
Okay.
And then we're going to
the winners.
Okay, it's all good.
It's all good.
I'll give you time to think about it.
I'm good. We're good. Let's roll.
And then we're going to make our predictions for the college football playoff. No, we're not going to do championship and all that kind. We're just going to do our predictions.
Who makes it in? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And it's funny that like no one was talking about what we were talking about with Notre Dame. Like everybody kept talking about the Illinois thing. Now there's like an Ian Book conversation raging, which I really wish would end like right now. But we're going to talk. We're going to make these predictions, and we're going to start with the ACC.
Okay.
I have been back and forth on this one. I think the Atlantic, Vince. I have Clemson. I imagine you have the same.
That's why I have winning everything. So
I've been back and forth on the Coastal.
Okay.
Between North Carolina and Miami.
Okay.
I like this Miami team more than a lot of people do. I do. And I think that had they not got destroyed by North Carolina at the end of last season, and then just an embarrassing that's Miami being Miami kind of way.
Right.
I think the expectations for this Miami team would be a lot higher. And I like this team. I think the problem that I have with them is the schedule. That's my concern with Miami. I think Miami they have a little bit more of a challenging schedule. I mean, they start off with Bama, which won't hurt them in the conference, but then they play at North Carolina, at Florida State, right? Like that part of it is tough. And then North Carolina, when you look at North Carolina's schedule, North Carolina doesn't play Clemson. They get Miami at home. They're at NC State, at Pittsburgh. They get at Virginia Tech. So, like, if they beat Virginia Tech, I mean, Miami's going to have to beat them at home to just have a chance to tie. So I think the schedule to me slightly favors North Carolina. However, I think Miami is going to get their butt whooping done at the beginning of the year, where North Carolina's butt whooping, I think, is going to come later in the year.
Ooh,
now, the game that to me is going to determine the winner of the Coastal is, in my opinion, Vince, is going to be a late season game between North Carolina at Pitt.
Really, Pitt is going to be involved in this thing.
Yeah, huh? Here's the reason. So they just played Notre Dame, right? So let's say that Miami and Pitt and Miami and North Carolina both have a loss. Let's just say that, right? And let's say that Miami's conference loss was to North Carolina, okay? Because here's Miami's conference schedule. They have Virginia at home, at North Carolina, home against NC State, and at Pitt. And then home against Virginia Tech or Georgia Tech, at Florida State, home against Virginia Tech, at Duke. So they got two tough games in the schedule, okay? Miami at Pitt is going to be a battle. That's going to be part of this conversation, right? That's going to be part of when I look at it to say, okay, that Pitt to me is going to have a say in who wins.
That makes sense.
But here's the thing that comes down to it for me. I think Miami's going to beat Pitt because I think they have too many athletes for Pitt. But here's the reason this North Carolina game would concern me a little bit, and I think could be a factor is. So North Carolina has a stretch of Florida State on October 9th, Miami on October 16th, bye week, at Notre Dame, and then home against Wake Forest. As we know, Wake Forest is one of those teams that runs a lot of plays. I mean, they're going to lead the nation in plays again this year. They got a lot of skill players coming back, and that's the kind of game where like it can wear you out. That Thursday, November 11th, they play at Pitt. So that's my concern for North Carolina. It's not only does that Pitt game come late in the year, November 11th, but it comes after a stretch of games where you play Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame on the road, and then Wake Forest, who again is going to run more plays than everybody else in the country. And so to me, when I look at that, I say, Vince, that to me is a game that concerns me if I'm a North Carolina fan.
Okay.
If Pitt wins that, if Pitt beats North Carolina, then I'm predicting Miami to win it. And at the end of the day, originally when I made my prediction, I had North Carolina, but I'm actually going with Miami. I think we're getting a Miami-Clemson rematch in the rematch from a couple years ago in the ACC title game, and I have Clemson winning that one.
Okay.
But I think the Coastal is going to be one of the more intriguing battles this year because I think Virginia Tech's going to have a say. I think Pitt's going to have a say. And I think Miami, North Carolina. I think there's going to be 4 good teams. None of them are great.
Yeah, right.
None of them are great. They're all going to lose at least 2 or 3 games in conference I'm referring to.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it's going to be a fun battle for college football diehards. But I think whoever wins is going to be obviously beat by Clemson.
I can't wait. That whole spiel you just gave gets me excited to watch football.
That's what makes college football fun.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So who are you ultimately taking out of that division?
I'm going to go with Miami. And
okay.
when I did my predictions on the message board a couple weeks ago, I went with North Carolina. That's what I said. I keep going back and forth.
Yeah, I hear you.
But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Miami.
Okay.
This one.
I've got all my championship games set here. So I went with North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Versus Clemson, and Clemson winning,
which I can't really fault you for because I said the same thing 2 weeks ago on the message board, and I could see that. So I said I probably regret saying this tomorrow. That's how back and forth I've been.
Yeah, no, I get that.
It's been a battle. So let's go Big Ten next.
Okay, Big Ten. I've got Ohio State. Shocking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus Wisconsin.
Yeah, which is kind of like been a normal thing.
Yeah, the Wisconsin's division is just not good. There's just not enough competition yet. Now, I think, someday I think Purdue may be able to have a say in that. Aren't they on that side?
Yes.
Yeah, they are on that side. I think maybe they could have a say, but just not yet. So yeah, it's Wisconsin, and I'm not sure it's all that close in the Big Ten West,
right?
Versus Ohio State from the Big Ten East, and then obviously I have Ohio State winning.
I mean, Ohio State's been in 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of the 10 Big Ten title games, and part of that is because I don't think they were eligible they were eligible the first year, but they stunk. That was the year that Luke Fickell led them. Then 2012 they weren't eligible. So in the last 8, they've been in 6 of them. They've been in 4 straight. So taking Ohio State's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Wisconsin has also been in 6 of the 10 Big Ten title games.
Right.
So we're really going out on a limb here.
We really are.
By predicting Ohio State versus Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But as you said, I don't have enough faith in Iowa. I think Iowa lost too much. I don't have a lot of faith in Minnesota. I don't have a lot of faith in Purdue being good enough to me, I think Purdue's worried about just getting to a bowl game. I don't think
sure. Yeah,
I'm a Purdue fan. I'm not worried about, or was this year we win the West? It's like, can we please have a winning record? Like,
exactly.
Nebraska's getting, smacked in the mouth right now by Illinois. Although Adrian Martinez, he just now took off for a long run. So at least he can do that still. But did he score? 20, 15, 10, touchdown, Nebraska. They're still getting killed. It's now like 30-16. So I think this one's a bit of a no-brainer. Okay. And I could see Wisconsin getting in with 3-4 losses.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
you're right.
That's how mediocre I think the West is going to be. I think the 3 best teams in the Big Ten are all going to be in the East.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Big 12?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go Big 12. I'll let you lead this one off.
Well, I think Oklahoma's the class of the Big 12 again this year. And Oklahoma, to me, is a dark horse to win the title, which I'll get into a little bit. I think part of the reason is they bring a lot back on offense, and I think their defense is ascending. They have actually a better talent on defense now, and I like Alex Grinch, and they play better defense. They don't have to be great on defense, though, to be a legitimate contender. They just have to not suck on defense, and that's where I think Oklahoma is. I think they're actually a decent top 5 or 6 Big 12 defense right now. And then, of course, you put on their offense that I think is going to be very good. Now, their running back depth chart scares the heck out of me. They're down to 2 running backs on their roster. That's concerning. But assuming they can stay somewhat healthy, those 2 guys, and maybe get a guy back or move somebody there, or there's some guys they could move from the slot there. I think this Oklahoma team's a dark horse title contender. And I think it's going to all come down to the defensive side of the ball, not the offensive side of the ball. If the defense can play better football, I have them winning it. Now, who are they going to play in the Big 12 title game? that's a little bit more of a
does it matter? Like, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know that it matters as much.
It won't matter who they play. I mean, I have Iowa State being that team.
That's who I had as well.
I have Oklahoma. I think Iowa State's going to be a good team this year. I think Iowa State's going to be the number 2 team in the league. I think there's a couple teams that could maybe jump up and surprise some people. I think that Texas could surprise some people if Sarkisian's a legitimate coach. I think Oklahoma State returns a lot this year. I think they could surprise some people. And I think TCU is a team that I would have my eye on. But when I look at – and part of the reason for that is, Vince, is Iowa State's schedule is not as easy as I think some people think. Number one, they play at Oklahoma. That's an L.
Right.
They also play at Kansas State, and Kansas State's had some big upset wins at home recent years, and they just beat Oklahoma 2 years ago.
Right.
They also play at West Virginia and at Texas Tech. That Texas and then it's in sandwich between West Virginia and Texas Tech road games is a home game against Texas. That all leads up to that Oklahoma game.
Okay.
That to me, and then they finish the year off home against TCU. That stretch of at this here's the thing for Iowa State. They have a stretch of at Kansas State, home against Oklahoma State, at West Virginia, home against Texas, at Texas Tech that leads into their at Oklahoma game. I think they could catch an L or two in there. I really do.
Okay.
I'm not predicting it. I'm saying I could see it. That's why I'm not as just, definitely they're going to be in as a lot of people are. I think a lot of people they're clearly the class of the Big 12, Oklahoma and Iowa State. I think the gap between Iowa State and the next couple teams is a lot closer than the gap between Oklahoma and Iowa State.
Yeah, as I say, I think there's a huge gap there between 1 and 2. But you're right. I think that there's a few teams that could have a case for that number 2 slot. I just don't think it's going to matter who Oklahoma plays.
But you still got to make a prediction.
And I did. And I had Oklahoma versus Ohio State, Oklahoma winning. So, absolutely. All right, Pac-12. Let's go all the way to the left coast.
Okay.
I went chalk in the North. Is that what they call it, the North, or whatever their divisions are called? Okay.
You went who in the North?
I said I went chalk, so I went Oregon. I feel like that. I feel like that's the kind of the chalk answer in the North. In the South was a little bit more complicated. Look, we just got done obviously doing our talk about Notre Dame and the schedule and why that I'm scared of USC. I had USC in there. Mm-hmm. I think they have an opportunity to make some waves in the Pac-12 Pac-12 South. Utah is always tough, but I don't think Arizona State, Colorado, I don't think they're going to be much. And UCLA, maybe. I'm curious to see what they're
do my
today
sleeper team
against Hawaii. Yeah, I'm interested to see how they do. Yeah, I could see that. But known commodities, what I know about USC, I'm taking USC. But I don't think it's going to matter because I've got Oregon beating them in the championship.
No, I think that game will be more competitive than you do. I don't think that Oregon's so good. Oregon hasn't done anything to prove to me that they're so good that they can just show up and beat whoever comes out of the South. They still have a lot to prove for me. USC is my pick now, but I'll say this. Utah, I think, is the better team in the South. I think USC is going to win it because you have to look at you can't make predictions just with no context. When I look at USC's schedule, number one, they get Utah at home. I think that matters. The other thing is Utah has to play Oregon. Now it's at home, but I think playing Oregon at home, that's going to be a tough game. They get Arizona State at home. They also have back-to-back games at Stanford and Arizona. They play at Oregon State. So there's some games in there that Utah could stub their toe. You look at USC's schedule, they get Utah at home, no Oregon, no Washington.
Right.
I think the schedule favors USC more than it does Utah. That's why I'm picking. I think I could see them both having 1 to 2 losses in the league, but USC gets the title because they win the head-to-head because it's in LA. That's where so even though I think Utah might be the better team, you have to take the schedule into consideration. And I think that's why I have USC. Now, of all my conferences, the team that I have is the upset, came out of nowhere, shocked everybody, won their division team. It's UCLA. I'm not predicting it because they got to prove it to me, but that's one where I've kind of written down if they got more talent than people think, They could have a really. It's just can it click for Chip this year? That's the question.
They're playing right now, aren't they?
Yeah, they started at 3:30. Yep.
Yeah, you don't have that one on your 17 screens.
I only have. We've been so into this conversation that I haven't gone to look at it yet. You got me all distracted with all this conversation about Notre Dame and the playoff and college football and this other kind of stuff.
Okay,
I haven't been able to bring it up yet. So
all right, fair enough.
But yeah, that's where I'm. Where I'm at with that, Vince.
So let's talk SEC. I have Alabama winning their side of things. Let me see here. I have it all pulled up here on my computer. Yes, I do. There we go. Okay. I've got Alabama winning the West. Mm-hmm. I think that, Texas A&M would be the closest to challenging them. But I still think Alabama's a class ahead of Texas A&M right now. SEC East is where we may have differing opinions. I know you're not high on Georgia. I am not high on Georgia. I just don't think that they're coached very well. And other than that,
I'm not high on Georgia from a standpoint of I don't think they should be considered like this national title contender team.
Right.
I still think they're the best team in the East.
Okay, I have Florida coming out of the East. Okay. I did pick Florida. So Florida versus Alabama and Alabama winning it.
I won't be shocked if Florida wins it because I think Florida is going to be better than people think. I think their defense is going to be improved, and I really like Emory Jones, a quarterback.
Right.
There's a couple reasons why I have Georgia over Florida. Number one is because I do think they're going to allow JT Daniels to be a little bit more pass friendly than they've been in the past. Even though again I don't like their coaching, but again it comes down to schedule. And that, to me, at the end of the day, that's the big thing. And when I look at Florida's schedule, they play Alabama on September 18th at home. I don't think they can beat Alabama. Although, if they do, great. They play at LSU, they play at Missouri, and then they have a home game against Georgia, or a neutral site game against Georgia in Jacksonville.
Neutral site, okay.
And then I look at Georgia's schedule, and Georgia doesn't get here. Don't tell me these schedules aren't fixed. I look at Georgia's schedule. There's no you look at the West. There's no Alabama. There's no LSU. There's no Texas A&M.
Well, that's Georgia's schedule. Nice.
They play Clemson in the opener, and then their conference games are South Carolina at home, at Vanderbilt, home against Arkansas. That's one of their crossover games. At Auburn, home against Kentucky, neutral field against Florida, home against Missouri, at Tennessee, at Georgia Tech. So the two teams that they drew out of the West this year are Arkansas and Auburn.
Jeez.
So
you're not a Bo Nix fan. You don't think
I like Bo Nix. I don't think they have the talent to but that's a game I could see Georgia losing. Imagine what my thoughts would be on their schedule if they were going to play two of LSU, Texas A&M, or Alabama. That's the whole point.
Right, exactly.
So I think Georgia's going to end up being better than they actually are because the schedule sets up favorably. Whereas Florida could actually be a better team and have a worse record because they got to play at LSU, home against Bama, and then Georgia on a neutral field.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from on that, Vince. It's kind of like the Utah. Look, the best
USC
team doesn't always necessarily win the division because
you're right. Because it's not even scheduling.
To be taken into consideration.
It's not balanced scheduling. Yeah, right.
Right. So that's kind of how I look at it. I did take Georgia and Alabama. Now I said all those things about Georgia. Now is when this show is going to go off the rails.
Oh boy.
I have nailed Alabama the last 2 years. I said in 2019, I see Bama starting to descend. And I predicted that they would not make the college football playoff. And you know what? They did not make the college football playoff.
That's true.
I predicted 2 losses, and I predicted LSU to be in the playoff. This year, then last year, if you remember, I predicted Bama to win a championship. I said it's going to be their last hurrah because they had everybody coming back, and it was a down year in the SEC because LSU lost everybody. I didn't have a lot of faith in Georgia. I don't, Florida. There was nobody in the SEC that I said that team's going to challenge. I think this is a year where the SEC ascends a little bit and Bama comes down a little bit. And I actually have Bama losing a game in the regular season and then losing to Georgia in the SEC title game.
Wow. Okay. Yep, you're
because
right.
Because we got to be honest, Georgia has given Alabama a tough game the last time they played. I mean, Georgia blew that game in 2018, the conference championship game. Georgia, remember that stupid safety punt safe call that they made?
Yeah.
Georgia was beating Bama. And then Georgia
right.
was beating Bama in the title game in 2017 and blew it. This is the year that they don't blow it. And the reason why, JT Daniels. They'll blow a couple games in the regular season, which I'll get into, but they're going to win the SEC title, in my opinion.
Okay. All right.
They're going to beat Bama. So that's my prediction. So conference winners, Vince, both agree on Clemson, right? Both agree on Ohio State. Did we predict Ohio State to win? I know we said who was going to play it. Did we just kind of both assume it?
I think it was understood.
Not actually vocalize it. Like you guys needed us to actually say that out loud? Really? Both Oklahoma in the Big 12. And then we both went Oregon in the West, but I think it's going to be a more competitive game.
Yeah.
And then SEC, you're going Bama, I'm going Georgia.
Okay, so there's our difference. All right.
So now
this is obviously going to affect the college football playoff.
Now, Vince, it's college football playoff time.
And I don't have –
give me your 4.
Okay, I've got it written down here. I've got 5 teams written down, and that's not legal. That's not going to work.
Right. You got to pick 4, buddy.
Yeah, so here are my here's what I'm ready. I'm going to do it. I'm going to bite the bullet. See, can you hear that? Crossing one out. All right. Okay. Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Ohio State.
Okay. Ohio State or Oklahoma. I'm going to go in order of seeds.
Oh, I see. I didn't seed them out. I just wrote them down.
No,
so that yeah, okay.
Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson.
Okay.
First year, there's no SEC team in the college football playoff.
Ooh, that's going to get people all fired up.
I know it.
All fired up.
But hey, here's the deal. I've nailed the SEC the last 2 years. I said LSU was going to win it in 2019. I said Alabama was going to win it all last year, right? Because it was a down year in the SEC. And I think we can all agree that it was a down year in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so that's where I'm saying I don't think I think they lost too much on the line. I think that the difference in them and Notre Dame is they're playing a great quarterback, but they're having to replace him with a redshirt freshman with 22 career passes. Notre Dame is replacing him with a kid that's been in the Rose Bowl before. Yeah. And also, with all due respect to Javon McKinley, Ben Skoranek, they're not Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith.
No.
And they lost Najee Harris. And they lost Pat Surtain from a defense that wasn't very good last year. Right. And so it's kind of like the 2019. I did not think Bama was going to be that good in 2019 compared to Bama. Right. For Bama. So when I say not that good, I'm talking about compared to the team that's won like 7 titles in the last 12 years. Right. And I see this team as the same way. I think they're slowly making a descent. And I think this is the year that it's going to happen. And I think part of it is because, again, part of this is about schedule. And I think Bama's schedule is set up to where I think they're going to drop a game. And because they're in the West, the Florida game is going to be a challenge. They play at Florida. I could see that. I don't predict it. They play at Texas A&M. Ole Miss always seems to always give Bama a tough game, right? I mean, Ole Miss beat them twice with Hugh Freeze. They had them down 24-3 a couple years ago with Matt freaking Luke as their head coach. Right. And they gave Bama the toughest in regular season contest of the year last year. They play LSU at home and they play at Auburn and they play at Texas A&M. I see a loss there somewhere, either at Florida, at A&M, at Mississippi State, home against LSU, at Auburn. In there, I see a loss, 1. And then they're knocked out. But with Georgia, I see Georgia having 2. I think Georgia's going to lose to Clemson. Now, all this changes next week if Georgia beats Clemson. If Georgia beats Clemson, I think they're going to be a college football team.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But I have Georgia plays Clemson at home, and they play Florida on a neutral field, and then they're at Auburn. So I have them losing to Clemson, right? Then between Auburn on the road, Florida on a neutral field, I think between one of those 2 games, they're going to lose one of those 2 games. That's where I came down to it. Okay. So that's how I have Georgia having 2 regular season losses, but Alabama having 1, but then Alabama gets beat by Georgia and you've got a 2-loss SEC team. 2 2-loss SEC teams.
And then that's basically they're just going to split votes and be correct. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I think they both fall out of the top
perfect
four.
Storm.
Right. Yeah. And you're going to have an undefeated Oklahoma team or a one-loss Oklahoma team, an undefeated or one-loss Ohio State team. And I think both of those losses would be early if they happen, especially Ohio State. I see I had Notre Dame undefeated or one loss, one of those two, but I went undefeated. And then I have Clemson being undefeated or with one loss. I actually have Clemson losing a game. I have them losing a regular season game. I think they'll lose to NC State or something like that. Now that could get interesting if Clemson has a loss to NC State. SEC people will start talking about, Clemson had only one loss and they lost to a bad team and they play in a bad league, and they're going to pretend in their crazy minds that they didn't lose to Georgia, that Georgia didn't lose to Clemson at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And that's where it's going to me, where it would come down to. So I've nailed the SEC the last 2 years, right? You remember, Vince, I picked LSU to win it 2 years ago.
I know that for a fact.
Bama to win it all, bounce back and win it all last year. And this year I'm predicting this is the first year where we see it.
Okay.
And that's my prediction. And that is then going to give this alliance the ammunition it needs to really buy into pushing back against the SEC.
Right, because they'll have all the ammunition.
Correct.
Because they'll be the only ones, plus Notre Dame, obviously.
Because they're going to say, hey, look, the SEC is vulnerable.
Right.
Now's the time we really got to push it.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. That's my prediction. Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's my four.
And I was Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Ohio State. So
that's
I had
my
Clemson
four.
On the outside.
That's my four. I'm not predicting champs today. We're gonna, but that's our playoff team.
We'll see how things go. I mean, look, a lot can happen between now and December, whatever, when they pick these teams, right? And the best part is we all get to enjoy that together.
That's right.
And that's right. There'll be a lot of discussion about this on the message board. So make sure that you sign up, because that is where a lot of this will be going on. And I will remind everybody that on Mondays, when we're in the season, our Monday show, we're going to be talking about really not Notre Dame. We're going to
we will talk about Notre Dame first.
Of course,
we're also going to talk a lot of college
because we'll kind of recap Brian. No, that's Tuesday. We'll recap Brian's Kelly's
Monday.
Press conference. Is it Monday? Okay, so we'll recap Brian Kelly's press conference, but then we talk about kind of the big picture. What did we see? Yeah, what did we see that weekend?
And then
football.
It'll also then lead us into, how does this impact some of our preseason?
Yeah.
We'll tie that into.
Absolutely.
And we're going to do sort of game previews of some of the bigger games. So like next week, we will have a preview of Georgia Clemson, for example. So we're going to have a lot of fun this year. We told y'all, even when we launched the message board, we told y'all we're not taking a step back from the YouTube channel.
Right.
We're not like, we're going. We've used all of you to build the message board. Sorry, no, we're going to keep growing this sucker.
Yeah.
And this show's not over too, because we're going to get into. So what I'm a little disappointed in our YouTube folks, I don't see a lot of Notre Dame predictions in here, Vince. And so it is time.
It's going to go quick.
Wrap up our college football preview, right?
Yeah.
We gave our conference winners and we gave our college football playoff deals. And so we have now officially wrapped up our predictions for the 2021 college football season. Now that we move past our preview of Notre Dame, now that we move past our college football thing, it is now time for the mailbag. And today's mailbag better consist of all of you putting your money where your mouth is. Let us know what your Notre Dame record is for Notre Dame, and let us know your college football playoff. Kenny Moore, I think, is the only one I've seen so far, and he has his college football playoff prediction. He has Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State, and Notre Dame and Ohio State. So what I want to hear from all of you is, first of all, what's your Notre Dame predictions? What's that?
It said looks familiar.
I know, you like that. He actually put that up, I think, before you put yours up.
Oh, okay. And I'm all the way at the top, so I wasn't reading anybody else's stuff.
Yeah, so his was at 4:06, so like 7 minutes ago. So I think Kenny put his up, I believe, before you did. So, so what I want to hear from y'all is Notre Dame record, and then postseason, who your 4 playoff teams are.
Okay.
So that's what I want to hear. So Kenny kicked it off. Kenny gave us – so Kenny clearly has Notre Dame at least 11-1.
Yeah.
Right?
Has to be. Because
I would say
can we all
at
agree,
least 11-1.
Can we all agree that unless something absolutely ridiculous happens, a 10-2 Notre Dame team is not making it into the college football playoff?
No.
New Year's 6?
There have to be 3 loss winners. 3 loss conference winners.
Right.
There'd have to be at least 2 of those.
Right. And New Year's 6? Yeah. They'll make it into New Year's 6, I think. And could they still parlay that into a great offseason, like have a big win over a big opponent?
Go to the Sugar Bowl and beat Georgia that would not, like that? Yeah.
Would I be disappointed to a degree? Yeah. But if they go out and they beat a really good team in a New Year's Six Bowl, we're still having great conversations in the offseason about where this program is. Okay. So yeah, I agree that Kenny clearly has them at least undefeated or 11.
He has them
probably 11.
He just put it up 11-1 with a loss to Cincinnati. So then he has them losing early to Cincinnati and then running off a string of wins.
Okay.
So when we have a couple more events, so you're at the top. If you want to start looking for some questions there, we will answer questions and stuff like that. But we're also going to have some of these.
Between you, we're looking for questions or predictions. That's what we're looking for.
I'm at the bottom, Vince. I'm seeing the predictions. So as you're looking for questions, I will then bring up some predictions.
Okay, sounds good.
So here we go. Michael Eakin will call. Okay, so no, Brandon's 12-0. I love it. That's a good way to start. It's a good way to start.
Right.
It's a good way to start it.
A lot of people agree with him. Michael Eakin says I second that, and Irish Joe says I third it.
But Michael Eakin, when he had to give his prediction, has Notre Dame at 10-2 with losses to Virginia Tech and USC.
Well, that's not.
So he's buying into the Virginia Tech trap game thing. So Michael's definitely there with us on that one, Vince. Griff, however, is with Brandon. He's got 12-0.
He's got the positive vibes going.
Yep. Philip Arriaga says, here we go. 12-0 with a loss in the playoff, better than Ty Willingham days. That doesn't mean anything to me. Charlie Weiss was better than the Ty Willingham days. But 12-0 with another loss in the playoff, I think would be disappointing to me. Just because it's kind of like, here, disappointing relative to the standard that Brian Kelly has created in the program, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you're 12-0, but when are you going to finally start winning some of these games? I would rather 10-2 and win a Sugar Bowl against Georgia than to go 12-0 and lose another playoff game. Unless it's the only exception would be is they play Bama for 4 quarters and Bama wins by a field goal late. That would be like, okay, yeah, we lost in the playoff again, but
exactly.
That's progress. That's progress.
Tommy's calling you out, even though you did admit it earlier. It says, do you have a TV on and muted in the background?
I said that to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said that at the very beginning of the show.
I think people would be disappointed if you didn't.
Yes.
I think that's where we're at here. Yes. That's how I feel.
Of course I have that on in the background.
Here we go. Nate Wallace says, less than a bold prediction, 11-1, lose to North Carolina after surviving the first 4 games of the midseason gauntlet, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, USC.
And he also added later, Vince, he has them in a New Year's Six game. Nate Wallace has them in
at 11-1. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Which, odd men looking out. Is that possible? Absolutely.
With the way that college football's gone the last couple years. See, what's funny is going into 2019, there had never been, I think I'm saying this correct, there had never been more than one undefeated team in the playoff. And there had been a couple years where there was no undefeated teams. The last 2 years, it's been different. There's been 3 undefeated teams. Yet in 2019, LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame were all undefeated. No, actually, they were all undefeated. Alabama was undefeated. Clemson was undefeated. Ohio State was undefeated. And Notre Dame was undefeated. And then last year, Alabama was undefeated and Ohio State was undefeated. So you had 2. So with the way that if it's a year like it was a couple years ago, an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets left out. And if there's 3 or 4 undefeated conference championship winners, it's going to be harder for me to say Notre Dame should be an 11-1.
Sure.
In my opinion. I would be understanding of that. What's the next one, Vince?
Just a little Michigan bashing. It says, breaking, Michigan is requiring all fans to provide proof of an 8th grade reading level upon entry to football games this season. Expect attendance rates to drop drastically.
That is a phenomenal.
It's terrible, but I love every second of it.
But it's true. That's great.
I'm sorry.
That's great. I love it. I love it. We have said this before. We'll always be professional in our analysis. We're always going to call it like we see it, with one exception.
Yep.
That's the only program I just despise in football. And it's more about that right there. It's not necessarily Michigan's football program. I grew up respecting Michigan's football program as a kid because I grew up in Ohio State territory. It wasn't until I got older and started meeting a lot of Michigan fans that I realized like the internet has completely awoken, has made everyone else in the world aware of just how bad Michigan fans are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's really not good.
Craig Sebring thinks 11-1.
Yeah, we got a lot of those down here, Vince. So I'm going to pull up some of these here. We got.
Cool. I'm finding out what games everybody's coming to.
Yep. Dropping Dimes has Notre Dame 13-1 and winning the title.
Interesting.
He is coming with fire today, and his playoff team is Oklahoma 1, Clemson 2, Notre Dame 3, and Ohio State 4. So can I say something about that? That would be a dream scenario for Notre Dame because they'd have to beat 2 of the powers. And the scare for me would be a situation where like they draw Oklahoma, like let's say Clemson and let's say Notre Dame gets in and they have to play Oregon in the first round. Let's say Oregon makes it. Notre Dame beats Oregon, and then Oklahoma upsets one of the big 3.
So then they beat
Oklahoma, and that would allow the media to say, well, yeah, but they didn't beat Clemson, they didn't beat Ohio State. But you know how the media would play.
I do. I know.
This right here by dropping Dimes is a perfect scenario because they'd have to beat one of the powers. They'd beat Clemson on a big stage, and then they'd beat Oklahoma or Ohio State. So, yeah, that would be the dream for me is in that scenario that Ohio State beats Oklahoma and Notre Dame beats Ohio State. That would be the dream for me. And then Nate Wallace also had his playoff pick of Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma.
Okay.
Because remember, he said he had Notre Dame in a New Year's 6.
Right. Yeah. Can't have him in the playoff if you got him in a New Year's 6. That's for sure.
Larry Friedel, 11-1. Reese does not grow another appendix.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible. I don't think he can grow another one, but
yep.
Not a doctor.
Well, he had a super chat yesterday after you left about Marcus Freeman inspires Tommy Reese to grow a new appendix. Because we were on like a Marcus Freeman thing.
That's
you got any more comments, Vince? Because I got some more predictions down here.
Talking about going and seeing recruits.
Okay, so Jeff Perry has Notre Dame going 11-1, and it looks like he's saying that he has Oklahoma winning it all. Griff has Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oklahoma as his 4. I'm seeing a lot of this. So I'm seeing some people leaving the SEC out. So I don't know if that's kind of because of what I said or if other people are seeing what I see, which is I think the SEC is going to – I think the SEC is stronger this year from 3 to 7 and not quite as good 1 to 3 or 1 to 2. That's where it comes from. And so – I actually think it's going to be a credit to the SEC this year that they're going to have a 2-loss champion because I think there's good depth there this year and the schedule set up kind of nicely. Patrick Barnes has 11-1 with a loss to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I got one here. Nate Wallace says Jack Cohn won't let us lose to Wisconsin and Marcus Freeman won't let us lose to Cincinnati. I hope you're right.
I can see that.
But I also understand exactly where you're coming from.
Right.
Absolutely. Because Jack Cohn's going to put points on the board against Wisconsin. And I think when it all boils it down, when we boil it down and we're talking about the game and everything, Jack Cohn's going to be a difference maker in that game.
Yeah,
he is. So
I agree.
I'm with you on that one. And I trust Marcus Freeman explicitly. So I'm with you there too. I'm about to get bumped, just to let you know.
Okay.
I'm getting down to the end of my scroll and I'm at like 240-ish.
Okay. Christopher Sally has Notre Dame 12-0 with a win in the playoff, but they lose a high-scoring championship game to Oklahoma. As long as the win in the playoff is over Ohio State, Alabama, or Clemson, I can live with that.
Yeah.
That would be a step in the right direction, in my opinion. Paul Kinlan says, if we have a good running game, 12-0.
Oh, that's it. Now that's an interesting take. I enjoy that. I get it.
Griff says we're getting another shot at Clemson this year and beating them in a back-and-forth thriller. Because remember, Griff had Notre Dame and Clemson as the 2 and 3 seeds. And then he said, I only see Notre Dame and Ohio State as the 2 undefeated teams this year. So he has the 1 and 2 as undefeated. Okay. I think Ohio State's going to lose a game, Vince, because they're starting a quarterback that's never thrown a pass before.
Right.
I think this is –
high star quarterbacks, but they still haven't played in college.
They've never thrown a pass.
Yeah, right.
Like all 3 of their quarterbacks have combined for the same number of Division I college football passes that you and I have combined for in our careers.
Yes, exactly.
That's not good. And you look at their schedule; it's a challenging schedule. They play at Minnesota and home against Oregon, and then they're at Indiana, home against Penn State. I see a loss there. Now, I will say this. If they don't lose within the first 4 games of the season, they won't lose. That's why I don't see them losing to Penn State at the end of October or Nebraska, Purdue, or Michigan in November. I think if they're going to lose, it's going to be like the Virginia Tech game in 2014.
Okay.
So, I could see Oregon beating them, for example, in the second game of the year, which is what could make Oregon as an interesting because that's the thing. If Oregon loses a game in the Pac-12 but has a win over Ohio State, if Oregon goes 12-0, for example, and they lose the game in the league but they have a win over Ohio State, they'll be in the playoff.
Right.
I just don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna beat Ohio State and run the table in the league because I do. We'll see.
I think
they play at Utah, at Washington, at UCLA. They have enough tough road games that I could see them dropping a couple.
I think we missed a super chat, Brian.
We did?
I don't remember this one. It says, with your chest, $3.72 because he goes, IB store shirts are too inexpensive. I'm rounding up.
Okay.
I thought that was great. Hey, he wanted to give us a certain amount. There you go. Okay. I love it. Hey, I'll take it, man. Inexpensive equals getting them out to the masses,
I don't know how much less expensive. I mean, I make almost no money off of those products.
No, he's saying they're too inexpensive.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah. He said inexpensive.
I appreciate that.
He wanted to give us more money. So
okay, I see. I read that wrong. I got a little. My feelings got.
I know you did. I could see it on your face.
I was like, man, I like making almost nothing off of those things. It's like, okay, I got you. My bad with your chest. My bad. That's on me. That's on me. I got a little sensitive for a second there, but yeah, I appreciate that. All
right.
So I think that means he probably went in there and made, because I did see that we had an order.
Yeah, it's got to be him.
We had a shirt order.
See?
So here, yeah. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thanks for the support.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Wear that shirt proudly.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way,
absolutely.
And this is personal, but I'm throwing it out there because this is our fam. Guess what my son wore under his football equipment?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Game day on Thursday, because he's on the freshman team. He wore his Gap Closers T-shirt, and he goes, "Dad, it should say Gap Closed," as he walked out. So yeah, he's pretty fired up.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah,
that is really good.
Had to share that one with you.
I appreciate that very much. And the latest store order also had a discount. So clearly it was from someone who signed up for Irish Breakdown because, as I've said to y'all before, if you sign up for the message board, you do get a 10 or 20% discount depending on, you go monthly, you get 10% discount. If you go annually, you'll get a 20% discount. I have a super chat down here, Vince, I can pull up.
Yeah, we do.
Philip has a super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. With the $9.99 super chat, Philip. I appreciate you very, very much. And Philip also said, "We don't lose to Virginia Tech. I won't accept it."
I'd love that too. I love that too, man. That's awesome.
I dig that. All right. And we said Griff earlier, right? Tracy Tipton has Oklahoma, Georgia, Clemson, and Notre Dame as the 4 playoff teams.
Okay, Georgia. All right.
Sid Irish does bring up an interesting thing. He said, anyone worried about rain in Tallahassee? Our record in ACC rainy games isn't good. Yeah.
That's a really good point. And
because that hurricane's kind of coming up. You got that hurricane coming up the west coast towards Louisiana. And obviously Tallahassee's on the northwestern part of the state of Florida. So, yeah, I'm always concerned when it rains for Notre Dame because they just have not handled that very well in recent seasons.
I see you jumped into the chat here at one point.
Yes. Yes. All right, let's get back some more predictions here while Vince is looking for some more. Andrew Rhodes has Oklahoma, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Georgia. Can't wait for the season. Will be at the game next weekend.
Nice.
I will as well.
That's awesome.
I will as well.
That's awesome.
Jeff Perry has Oklahoma as the 1. Notre Dame is Ohio State is the 2. Notre Dame is the 3. Clemson is the 4. Another person with no SEC team in there. No undefeated teams in the college football playoff. Now, that would actually be more getting back to the norm of the way it was a few years ago. We do have another super chat from Patrick Barnes.
Thank you, Pat.
Yep, we definitely see that because there's a little avatar at the top. So appreciate you, Patrick. 1 week, boys. 1 week till we get to watch Notre Dame football game. I'm so excited.
I can't believe that we're a week away. Like, I am going to get nothing accomplished at work this week. Not this work. The other work.
This week you're going to be putting your heart and soul into work this week.
I'm talking about the other work.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that's going to be getting accomplished. You know what? That's okay.
Okay. Liam Gaming, Vince, I think, thinks that we're doing bold predictions today. I'm kidding. 12-0 in a natty, 6 shutouts, and Marcus Freeman offered job at the Vatican.
Pope Freeman? Is that the job that you're referring to?
Yeah.
Now, see, Marcus Freeman has 6 kids, so I'm not sure Pope is really in his in his career path.
Yeah. He's made some personal choices that keep Popehood from being part of his job description. He didn't say he'd be offered a job as a pope. As the pope.
Well, that is true.
A job at the Vatican.
So he could be with the Swiss Guard.
He could be the defensive coordinator for the Vatican. But that ain't happening. No.
By the way, Marcus Freeman's kid, pretty good football player.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's in middle school.
So you've seen him? You had a chance to see him play?
I've heard. Yeah.
Okay.
Some scuttlebutt, but yeah.
Okay.
New kid.
Mascali. No, I'm just joking.
It's this new kid named Freeman. His dad's on the Notre Dame staff. Yeah, I know who he is.
Gee, who could that be?
Yeah.
That's funny. Griff also said, the more I look at this season as a whole, the more I realize that there's no true superpower team coming into the year, wide open year. And that's where I'm at, Vince. I think there's some really good teams. I don't think there's an Alabama 2020. I don't think there's an LSU 2019.
Right. Exactly.
I don't think there's a Clemson 2018 this year. And that happens because there wasn't one of those in 2017 either.
And we had a show about this a long time ago about kind of the whole landscape and why it's not out of the realm of possibility that this Notre Dame team can make some noise.
Right.
That they could potentially win the championship because of the landscape of where everybody's at, replacing key pieces and parts and things of that nature, coaching changes, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Losing quarterbacks and not having grad transfers like Cone to
I feel like it's wide open. It's wide open. Oh, Sid Irish gave an update here. This is a little bit ago, but UCLA up 10-0.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's 17-3 now. 24-3 now. Excuse me.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anthony Solomon says, joining late today. I just finished a project for my wife. 12-0 record this year.
Well done.
Good for you, by the way. Good for you. 12-0 record this year. Cone is better than Book. Great show, guys. So I have not done a project for my wife yet. That's coming after the show. I did predict 12-0. I do think Cone is better than Book, and I do think this was a great show. So Anthony Solomon and I are completely on the same page.
Yeah, we are. I am. Does cut the grass count as a project for the wife? Probably not.
Yes, so she won't let you. I mean, part of the reason of having a teenage son is to allow him to cut the grass. She won't let you do that, so that's considered a project for the wife. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Sold. I got up early.
Yeah, but you didn't predict 12-0. So
no, I did not.
So there you go.
Did not. I'm too much of a chicken. I'm a chicken.
And did we finish this? No undefeated. So Jeff Perry added even more to his previous. So he's got same playoff teams, no undefeated teams, college football. But then he added Notre Dame wins over Ohio State and Oklahoma in the playoff. Christopher Sally, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Georgia.
I'm down with you now. By the way, I'm getting into all the predictions.
There's a lot of talk, not a lot of questions during the.
Nailed
and not a lot of talk about stuff we weren't talking about in the show, so it's like the chat has become kind of its own entity now.
Yes, it has.
Griff says, I believe the other teams in the SEC have closed the gap on Bama to the point where going undefeated won't happen. And that's kind of where I'm at, I think the SEC is going to be really good, like deep. Like I think where the SEC has been overrated in the past is they'd have like 2 or 3 great teams.
Yeah.
And then they that doesn't make teams 8, 9, 10, 11 good. Whereas Oregon, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 have been underrated because they didn't have the 1, 2, and 3 that the SEC had, but they were better at 5 through 9 than the SEC. And the Big 10 has had some years like that too, where they don't have any great teams, but teams 6, 7, 8, 9 are good football teams.
Right.
I think this year the SEC is going to have more. They're going to be really good at 5, 6, 7, and 8. Than they've been in the past, and that's going to result in some upsets.
Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be a lot of debate, which Which, by the way, I really enjoy when there's actual debate when you're talking about teams with 1 or 2 losses or whatever the case may be. There's a legitimate debate. Let's talk about their resume. Let's talk about who they played. Let's talk about on-field results. And we're not just looking at, well, they didn't lose a game. So
that's what made, to me, Vince, the first couple years of the playoffs. So part of what made the first playoff so entertaining was there was so much debate and controversy about Ohio State leaping Baylor and TCU.
Right.
Because they lost early in the year and they lost to an unranked Virginia Tech team. And I know that they killed Michigan State on the road, who was good that year. And I know they killed Wisconsin 59-0, who was ranked in the Big Ten title game. But and then, TCU tied with 55-3. Why are you dropping it? That was fun. That's what made that last month of the season fun. And then there was the debates of, does Florida State really deserve to be in? Yeah, they're undefeated, but they haven't beat anybody, you know? Because when Notre Dame imploded, it took the only good win Florida State had all year off their resume. Well, then Florida State goes in as the defending champ, as undefeated, and got destroyed by Oregon, which only increased but TCU wouldn't have got beat like that.
Right.
That's, to me, what I want to see this year. I don't want to see where it's like, okay, we know for the last 3 weeks of the season, even if Clemson and Alabama lose a game, they're still going to get in.
Right.
That's how it's been.
It's just boring.
Yeah. So that's kind of partly why I'm so much looking forward to the season, because I see all that. I really do. Okay. And Dropping Dimes is going full in. We're going to destroy Oklahoma in the title game. Emerald Isles says Notre Dame 11-1 with an early loss to Cincinnati or a loss to USC.
Emerald Isles go 3 down for his next comment. He goes specific.
His or her. Playoff. I'm just joking with you, man.
You're right.
Playoff field: 1 Ohio State, 2 Clemson, 3 Bama, 4 Notre Dame. Semifinals, he's got Ohio State beat Notre Dame by 6. Clemson beat Bama. And in the title game, he has Clemson beating Ohio State in the title game. So you see the Tigers getting back on track. Okay.
John to lead them to the championship.
John Erickson says, whatever I predict, the opposite happens, so I'm going Notre Dame 0-12.
Spoken like a true Notre Dame fan, too, by the way.
Yep, I love it. Love it.
That's great.
That is awesome. Will Jansen says, as our playoff chance is stronger at 11-1 with a loss versus a weaker team, Virginia Tech or Florida State, or versus a stronger team, UC Southern Cal, give us a stronger resume, even if a worse loss. I actually think it goes – so here's the difference between the playoff committee and ESPN. ESPN obsesses over who teams lost to. Yeah, but their loss was to such and such, right? And what the committee has always said is, there's something to that, but we care more about who you beat. And that's something the committee has always said. And I just believe that they're going to care more about who Notre Dame beat. So to your point, Will, that's why I think they'd be better off like Ohio State in 2000. Does Ohio State – here's a question for you, Vince. Ohio State in 2014, the year they won the title, they got in with a loss. They lost early in the year to an unranked Virginia Tech team. Virginia Tech that year went
that was like the opening game of the season, wasn't it?
It was like second or third. It was early. Yeah, it was early in the year. That was not a good Virginia Tech team, like I said. And they lost by two touchdowns at home to Virginia Tech that year, right? But then you look at the rest of the year, and Ohio State beat Penn State on the road, beat number 5 Michigan State on the road by 12, beat Michigan that year, and then beat a 13th ranked Wisconsin team 59-0. If Ohio State beats Virginia Tech, second game of the year, and then loses in November at Michigan State, I don't know if they're in the playoff, or if they'd have lost a Big Ten title game. I don't know if they're in the playoff. Part of their resume was that they beat number 5 Michigan State on the road. I don't know if that happens if they get in, if their loss is to one of the good teams. So the committee has always shown that. They're going to put in the teams with the best resume, and the best way to build your resume is to beat people. So I think it's a great question, Will. To your point, I think they'd be better off getting upset by Purdue and then running the table. The thing is, what can't happen is what hurt Ohio State in 2018. If you lose to that team, you can't get killed.
Yeah.
And I think that's what hurt Ohio State in 2018 is not only did they lose to Purdue, they got killed. Mm-hmm. And there was 3 undefeated teams in 2018. as well. Or was it 4? Was it 4 undefeated teams in 2018? Because you had Alabama in. They did not have a loss, correct? They were undefeated. Clemson was undefeated. No, Oklahoma had a loss. Remember, they lost to Texas early in the year.
Right.
And then they won the rematch in the Big 12 title game. So there's 3 undefeated teams in Oklahoma. Now, if Ohio State doesn't get killed by Purdue, there's a case to be made that maybe Ohio State would have been, had the better resume. But they didn't. They got killed by Purdue, and that hurt them. Hurt them a lot.
Nate Wall says, thanks for activating my weather paranoia.
Wasn't me. Blame Sid Irish. Blame Sid Irish. I just hope we don't get in a situation where it starts shooting straight up the Florida coast and we start talking about like the game getting canceled. That would just,
oh my God. Why? You had to go there.
I'm just saying. Nebraska just scored with 2:41 left to make it 30-22. They're going to go kick the extra point. Sid Irish said, watched a few Florida State practices. They look small. Yeah, they're not good. They're not. They're really not. Emerald Isle says, note in previous prediction, I think everyone has at least one loss this season. OU deserves the playoff seed more than Bama, and most folks agree with this. Bama gets the due to prior success SEC political.
Oh, the nod. I think it's supposed to be the nod.
Yeah. TT. Go, what, Vince? Let's go.
Emerald Isles, I believe, has
his. I didn't know. I just, because we've had this mistake before where, Shannon Hyduck. Vince called
I did.
Shannon a she.
I messed that
Shannon
one up.
Shannon is a he.
It's on me.
Other that he thought were he's and were she's. And obviously, we hope that nobody would be so sensitive that they would, when there's a name that does, like if it was like, Brittany, I would, okay, assume, but if Emerald Isles, I don't know one way or the other, right? So, but still, we want to make sure that we're trying our best to pronounce names correctly and things like that. Absolutely. TT says, I can see us undefeated. I was excited until we signed Madden. That says to me our O-line is a problem. In my opinion, if last year was normal, we wouldn't have made the playoffs. I guess 2 to 3 losses this year. So some not so much excitement here for him.
Well, that's okay.
Dropping dimes, I'm not expecting 12 because as a Notre Dame fan, I expect an upset, but I want some excitement. Okay. All right. Philip Arriaga says, do you guys see Drew Pine at all taking over for quarterback over Cohn if he has a bad half in one of these tough home games? Brian Kelly's yanked some for getting off to rough starts. I don't see that. I think that rough start against Cincinnati or Wisconsin would have to come after like bad games, multiple bad games. Yes, Brian Kelly has done that in the past. Brian has not done that recently. So, like, for example, when Brian Kelly benched Brandon Wimbush, that was a week or 2 later than the offensive coordinator wanted to bench Brandon Wimbush.
Right.
So, yeah. TT says, I'm guessing Wisconsin USC. They've nearly had our number in recent years, nearly. And my bold pick loss, FSU. I wonder if that's a closet FSU fan. I'm just joking. All right. Kenny, Nebraska being Nebraska, missed the PAT.
Wow.
And TT says, I was just joking about the FSU thing. He says, regardless of my poor outlook on the season, I love you guys and this group of fans. And I get where TT's coming from because that's been Notre Dame's life the last years. But part of the excitement of the preseason is that, you have that hope. Right. And it's now 31-3 UCLA with 11:25 left in the second quarter. I'm telling you, man, UCLA is my sneaky team this year. And somebody asked, maybe Hawaii's really bad. Hawaii was actually pretty decent last year. Hawaii went 5-4 last year. Yeah, not great, not bad. And they beat Nevada pretty good. And Hawaii played Houston in a bowl game and beat them by 2 touchdowns. So this is not a bet, and Hawaii brings back a lot. But I just think UCLA is going to be really good. I do, and part of it was I think their offense is going to be really good. They got Zach Charbonnet, the running back who transferred from Michigan, kid that played at Westlake Oaks Christian, Westlake Village. They got Britton Brown who played at Duke a couple of years ago, running back from Duke. They've got some receivers that are really good players. Chase Cota, remember him, Vince? Notre Dame tried to recruit Chase Cota.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to all come down. Their offensive line's experience. They got a kid named Sean Ryan, who's people are saying is going to be a first-round draft pick at left tackle. He's a kid that Notre Dame recruited. The problem is their defense stunk last year, but I think their defense is going to be better. And here's a Notre Dame nugget. Jordan Genmark-Keith was listed as their number one number one on the depth chart at one of the inside linebacker positions.
Huh.
I don't know if he started the game because I didn't see the start of the game. But yeah, he did start. So I'm going to actually go back and look and see if Jeremiah actually started. So because I have the game DVR, well not DVR, whatever it is on YouTube TV, I have it saved.
Who knows?
And so I'm going to go look and see if Jordan Markey started. That'd be great for him. I would love it if Jordan started because he's a good kid. So I'm going to see if he's in there. And then Sid Irish says the UCLA LSU game next week, which in the Rose Bowl, I believe is it's going to be a game, and I agree with you. I'm looking to see here. I got the first play queued up to see if Jordan's on the field for them. I'm not sure what number he is. So yeah, I have to look and see. Of course, their numbers are like gold, so I can't really tell. So I don't know if Jordan's starting for them or not, but he was listed number one on their depth chart. And Kids said, by the way, Keon Keeley looked like a man last night. Keon Keeley had 4 sacks in the opener last night. Keon Keeley is obviously a junior right now at Berkeley Prep in Florida, and he,
15. He's number 15.
Jordan is? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I was like, no, he didn't have 6 sacks last night. He had 4.
15.
You don't even know what you're talking about, Vince. Well, I said he had 4 sacks last night, and you're like, no, he didn't have 6. So it –
That's
no,
great.
I don't see 15. I see 45. Yeah, I don't see 15 on the field. But let me go back to that first play. But anyway, so Keon Keeley who's joined our chat, by the way, a few times. Keon Keeley had 4. Oh, he is. I see Jordan right there. So Jordan's in the starting lineup for UCLA. So that's awesome. Good for him.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Keon Keeley was a beast last night. He had 4 sacks against Clearwater Central Catholic. He was a monster. CJ Williams, so Mater Dei played Duncanville. They went down to Texas and played Duncanville. Duncanville's the number 13 team in the country. Mater Dei won 45-3. And CJ had 6 catches for 99 yards. And Morgan Walker had 2 touchdown catches last night. I have the whole rundown of how the kids performed last night on the front page at irishbreakdown.com. And, of course, we talked about Keon Keeley. He was a monster in that game. His first step on a couple of the clips I saw, Vince, is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's
good.
Absolutely ridiculous.
That's awesome. That's good. That's good for the future.
Yep. So anyway, so that's it. That's all the questions that we have. We're going to get off here. I'm going to go watch some football.
Yeah.
I don't know what Vince is going to do. I don't know. You got to go mow or something, or did you already do that?
I did that at 9 a.m. this morning. Perfect. But we have church at 5 o'clock.
Oh,
so
that's a good reason not to watch football. Certainly a good reason not to watch football. But thanks so much for joining the show today. We definitely had the diehards in here today.
Yeah, we did.
We didn't get up to our normal numbers, but you know what? I love the people that were in here today. We definitely had the true believers of college football were in the show today. So I want to thank everybody for being with us. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We're going to find out as we get through the course of the year. But just a reminder, our new content schedule is coming out. We will be now Monday to Sunday, basically. Monday to Friday will be 12:30 is when we'll start. There's going to be times during the season where we're not going to be able to go super deep into chat, into questions, because it's going to be so busy, but we're still going to try our best to answer all of your questions. At least I will, because Vince is going to be a little tougher for Vince because he's going to be in school. But and Fridays, then, of course, Saturdays and Sundays we'll have our post-game shows. Saturday will be a post-game show. Now, obviously, the week one's going to be different because it's a Sunday game. And then Sunday nights we'll have, and Vince, I think we said either 7 or 8. We haven't necessarily hammered down the time just yet.
Right. Yeah.
We'll do sort of an upon further review type of show, and that will not necessarily be a type show because it's going to be late. It'll just be more of us okay, we watch the film, here's what we think. And then of course we will have a couple X's and O type features on the message board only. So if you have not signed up for the message board, please do so. We are getting close to doubling what my number was for the goal for the type of the start of the season. So I'm very excited about that, but we're not there yet. So we need some more of you who have thought about signing up to sign up now. It's $4.99 a month, $49.99 for a year. That's not a special rate. That's not a $4.99 now. Next year we're going to double it back up. It's not 50. That's just our rate.
Right.
You can also, here's the thing. If you're not a message board person and you just want to support us, we have a booster club option that you can sign up and you can you can join either the Shamrock, the blue, or the gold booster club. And that's just a way to support us. And we appreciate that. Now that obviously is not money we're splitting with YouTube or anybody else. That's just coming to Irish Breakdown. And we greatly appreciate all of that.
It goes right back into the company.
That's right. It's stuff like that is why I was able to hire Mike Hutton, right?
Yes,
to be our new beat writer. It's why we have a 8-man staff right now of people going to write different features or be on the podcast, which I'm very excited about.
Awesome.
And then that allows me to do what I think I do best.
Right.
And so that's what I'm excited about. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. But well, like I said, a lot coming up. We're gonna rest our throats tonight and tomorrow, because when we get back on Monday, Vince, it's gonna be every day for quite a long time. So thanks for joining us. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.